Chapter 23:33. Just like that, everything returned to normal as if nothing had happened. He frowned and glanced at little Hachi subconsciously. He wanted to ask something, but he didn't know where to start. What should he ask? Should he ask if the commotion just now had anything to do with little Hachi? And the sudden appearance of this barrier, Jian Fengqi shook his head and dispelled that ridiculous thought. Xu Jing had said that this barrier had been here for a long time. How could it have anything to do with little Hachi? At this moment, little Hachi had already arrived in front of the barrier. When he was still 10 steps away from the barrier suddenly dissipated. Little Hachi waved at Jian Fengqi. "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Jian Fengqi was stunned for a moment, but then he followed her. It was probably a coincidence. After all, when they arrived, the barrier had also mysteriously disappeared. "Little Hachi, why do you think that barrier is not controlled by the 8th oracle? Isn't this her territory?" Little Hachi smiled. "How would I know?" Xu Jing hurried back to the palace of the illusory god. She wanted to look for the first oracle, but halfway there she remembered that she had asked for an audience several times before, and without exception she had been rejected. If she went again this time, the result would probably be the same. Xu Jing gritted her teeth, turned around and walked toward the residence of the second oracle. Just as she arrived at the door before she could knock, she bumped into Yu Qian, who was walking from the other side. It seemed that he had just returned. Second oracle. Seeing Yu Qian, Xu Jing hurried forward. "I have something important to report." Yu Qian was in a gloomy mood. He didn't want to pay attention to her, but when he heard her, he looked up at her and saw that her expression was not right, so he stopped. "What's wrong?" Just as Xu Jing was about to speak, her gaze suddenly froze as she saw a bloody wound on Yu Qian's hand. It looked like he had been bitten by something. Second oracle, the wound on your hand. Yu Qian's face darkened. "I was bitten by a beast on the Divine Beast Mountain." Xu Jing was shocked. "What?" On the Divine Beast Mountain there were hundreds of divine beasts. They were all taken care of by the second divine envoy. Normally, these divine beasts were especially respectful towards him. Why did they suddenly go crazy this time? Yu Qian gritted his teeth. In fact, he hadn't been there for a long time. Today he suddenly thought of this matter and wanted to go and take a look. Who would have thought that one of them would suddenly attack and bite him? Even though he had already killed it on the spot, the wound was still left behind. Furthermore, because the bastard's teeth were poisonous, he had even specially used medicine. Therefore, when he saw Xu Jing at this moment, his mood was at its worst. "These bastards are getting more and more impudent. How dare they bite you?" Xu Jing's words made Yu Qian even more irritated. He asked coldly, "Okay, it's already over. There's no need to mention it again. But you said that you have something to report. What happened?" A trace of difficulty flashed across Xu Jing's face. She then said, "Don't worry. There seems to be something wrong with the barrier on the Herb Mountain." Then she told Yu Qian what had happened. However, she deliberately skipped the part where little Hachi had attacked. It wasn't that she wanted to cover up for little Hachi, but as a divine envoy she had been slapped by someone who had just arrived at the illusory god palace and didn't even have a bloodline totem. This matter was too embarrassing in itself. If this matter were to spread, she would really lose her face. Anyway, she had plenty of ways to get back at him. After speaking, Yu Qian didn't speak for a long time. Xu Jing was a little nervous. "Second divine envoy, what happened to your face?" Yu Qian suddenly asked. Xu Jing was startled. Then she suddenly realized something. There was still a palm print on her face. She had actually forgotten about this matter. Just now she had rushed over in a hurry. Her mind was only thinking about the barrier. How could she remember this? In the end, Yu Qian saw it. Xu Jing lowered her head in embarrassment. Yu Qian asked, "Was this slapped by little Hachi?" Xu Jing braced herself and nodded. Yu Qian suddenly laughed. "Xu Jing, you are the 8th divine envoy. How could you be slapped like this? What are you doing?" Seeing that Yu Qian was angry, Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. It's because she attacked too suddenly. I didn't check," and Yu Qian looked at her coldly. Xu Jing's remaining words were suddenly stuck in her throat. Her face was green and white. After a long time she finally said, "Xu Jing is incompetent. You are indeed incompetent." Yu Qian didn't give Xu Jing any face. "You are the divine envoy. How could you be slapped by such a person? If this news gets out, the entire palace of the illusory god will be humiliated because of you." Xu Jing lowered her head and didn't dare to speak. How did you deal with that little Hachi? She paused and lowered her head even more. Not yet. At that time the barrier suddenly, so you were slapped but you didn't do anything in the end. You just came back like this? Yu Qian's eyes were opened. This was simply throwing the face of the divine envoy to the ground and letting others trample on it at will. Sensing his anger, Xu Jing clenched her fists, but didn't dare to say anything. At this moment it was useless to say anything. She couldn't pretend that what had happened didn't happen. Even if she went back and killed that little Hachi now, she had already suffered this slap. This humiliation was something that would never be erased. Yu Qian took a deep breath. But that's not the most important thing. Xu Jing, after so long, you still haven't taken down that barrier? Xu Jing's face turned pale and her legs went weak. In the past you tried to control Herb Mountain and did a lot of dirty tricks in private. I didn't care much about it. Because in my opinion, it's not a bad thing for you to be ambitious. At the very least it can help you solve the problem of the barrier more quickly and smoothly. But now, you used public power for private purposes. Not only did you alarm the emperor, but you didn't make any progress on the problem of the barrier at all. Xu Jing, you disappoint me too much. Xu Jing almost couldn't bear the series of accusations and reprimands. After a while she finally managed to find her voice. Second divine envoy, that barrier I tried my best, but it's not like you don't know how difficult it is to deal with. Yu Qian looked down at her with indifferent eyes. Of course I know that, but I've given you more than 10,000 years and you still haven't solved it. This is no longer something that can be summarized with the word, incompetent. Xu Jing's nails dug deep into her palms and she felt a sharp pain. However, she was almost numb at this time and couldn't care less about this. That barrier wasn't set up by me in the first place. It's so difficult to control it. Chapter 23:34. On the other side, little Hachi and Jian Fengqi returned to their residence. As soon as they entered the courtyard they saw a familiar figure. It was Yanqing. Seeing little Hachi and Jian Fengqi come in together, Yanqing stopped and took the initiative to speak for the first time. You went to the Herb Mountain? Little Hachi walked over with a smile. Brother Yanqing, how did you know? Yanqing paused and pursed his lips. Little Hachi saw his reaction and was very happy. This person really couldn't stand a little teasing, but it happened that this kind of person was the most interesting to tease. Little Hachi stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. Brother Yanqing, you seem to be very concerned about me? Yanqing looked down and glanced at her hand. He saw that half of the gorgeous nail polish on one of her fingers had fallen off. He narrowed his eyes. Did you fight with someone? Little Hachi was surprised. How did you know? Following Yanqing's gaze, she realized and couldn't help but click her tongue. Your eyes are really sharp. Glass, it's nothing. There was a woman who was annoying, so I gave her a slap. His words were really casual and carefree. Jian Fengqi said faintly. She slapped the 8th oracle, Xu Jing. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. Who told her to scold master first? Giving her a slap is already a light punishment. Listening to the conversation between the two, Yanqing quickly understood what happened. Then he frowned slightly. She didn't fight back and let you go just like that? Little Hachi laughed. She can't even take care of herself. How can she have time to care about me? With that, she turned and walked towards her room. I'm tired today, so I'll rest first. Don't disturb me. Before she finished speaking, she had already entered the room. Yanqing's eyes moved slightly. After a while he looked away and was about to leave. Hey, Lord Yanqing. Jian Fengqi shouted. Yanqing looked back at him with cold eyes. What's the matter? Jian Fengqi's eyelids twitched. What? Little Hachi slapped the 8th oracle. Even if you're an iceberg, please give some reaction. Why doesn't everyone seem to care about this matter? He couldn't help coughing and reminded him. Little 8 really slapped the 8th divine emissary in the face. I heard it. Yanqing was a man of few words and there was no change in his expression. Jian Fengqi choked and pounded his chest twice. Forget it, forget it. He couldn't afford to offend them. They're all really Hachis. Since everyone didn't care, why was he worries he is at this moment? A voice suddenly came from another room. Dong. It sounded like something had fallen over. Jian Fengqi looked over and saw that it was Mu Hongyu's room. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and knocked on the door. Hey, what's wrong? In the room, Mu Hongyu grimaced in pain as she stood up from the floor. Then she held the chair up. I'm fine. Hearing that her voice was full of energy, Jian Fengqi was relieved. He wanted to go in and take a look, but he gave up in the end. He knew that Mu Hongyu had been cultivating recently, trying to break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. She would encounter some troubles and problems. It was a simple matter. After thinking about it, Jian Fengqi gave a few more words of advice before turning to leave. When he looked back, Yan Qing was already gone. You're really not worried? Jian Fengqi shook his head. Hearing the footsteps outside leave, Mu Hongyu hissed and gently rubbed her shoulders. The Mahayana realm was really hard to cultivate. She tried all kinds of methods, but she still couldn't break through. Instead, she would often run to other places for no reason. Fortunately, she hadn't gone to any strange places so far. But in this illusory god palace, she had to be extra careful. She indignantly took out the map that Chu Luiwei had left behind and started studying it. Phoenix Cry Mountain. The mountain breeze blew and a tender green two-tian baby was swaying gently. Dumpling sat alone on the side, cultivating. Below her, there was a layer of reddish-gold flames burning silently. The surrounding energy quickly surged into her body. The aura surged and the pressure was prominent. After opening her 7th meridian, her cultivation speed had obviously increased a lot. After all, even Yi Zhao had only opened his 7th meridian. Now that she had reached such a level before officially becoming an adult, it was really heaven-defying. After a long time, Dumpling finally stopped and slowly opened her eyes. Those big black grape-like eyes seemed to have become clearer and brighter than before, and a bright light flashed through them. So boring. Dumpling let out a long breath. Her small hands were holding her cheeks and her chubby little face was full of worry. Although it was comfortable to stay here, it was really lonely to be alone. The key was that Ayu wasn't in the illusory god palace, and she couldn't find anyone to talk to. Dumpling sighed again. She suddenly sensed something and quickly turned her head to take a look. There was nothing behind him, nothing at all. Dumpling blinked. Strange. She clearly felt a pair of eyes looking at her just now. Dumpling's big eyes turned and retracted her gaze. She reached out and gently touched the two-tian baby's leaves. It grew very quickly here and now it had 5 leaves. Verdant and tender, full of vitality. As if affected by it, Phoenix Cry Mountain seemed to be more lively than before. At the foot of the mountain, some green sprouts had already grown on the originally bare ground. Although it had just grown out not long ago, it looked exceptionally pleasing to the eye. When will I be able to open my 9th meridian? Dumpling muttered softly. In the past, she didn't care much about this matter. Even if she knew that she had the purest bloodline, she didn't think too much about it. But now it was different. Only by opening the 9th meridian could he save Grandpa Chief. Moreover, only by being strong enough could he protect Ayu. As she spoke, she suddenly struck out with a backhand attack. A cluster of reddish gold flames flew out. Come out. Chapter 23:35. This time she hit nothing. No one appeared, not even a trace was left behind. Seemed like there was really nothing. Tuanzi didn't believe it. She stood up and ran over. Then she searched carefully in all directions. What, running so fast? She could not help but mutter under her breath. She was sure that someone was watching her in the dark. Unfortunately, she could not find out who it was. She put one hand on her waist and shouted at the empty void in front of her. If you have the ability to secretly watch me, then don't be afraid to come out. No one responded. Dumpling pouted angrily. I'm going to be angry. Still no one responded. Tuanzi was so angry that she turned around to leave and sat down again. Whoosh, as if sensing her anger, the energy of heaven and earth around Feng Ming Mountain suddenly surged quickly. In addition, the two-tian baby was also shaking, making the movement even louder. Puff. A reddish gold flame suddenly burned not far in front of Dumpling. Puff puff. With the first one taking the lead, the rest naturally flowed smoothly. A few more bursts of flames erupted from the mountain rocks. Soon these energies all rushed into Dumpling's body. They were purer and faster than the previous ones. Dumpling's entire body was quickly wrapped in flames, and her aura was constantly rising. She did not believe that when she was more powerful she would definitely be able to catch the other party. Godslaying Mound. Dark clouds gathered and the sky was dark. Under the gloomy sky, the space distorted and turned into vortexes, crazily accumulating energy. And Chu Liyue was standing in the middle of these countless vortexes. She closed her eyes and her slender white fingers plucked the void. The sound of the zither rose into the air. And in the depths of this tomb, there was also a guqin music which was constantly responding to her. Every note, every tone was perfectly matched. Chu Liyue's blood rushed in her body as if something was about to break out. At a certain moment the last guqin music finally fell, hovering in the empty and boundless wilderness for a long time. She suddenly opened her eyes. Then she waved her hand gently, and the countless vortexes above fell down one after another. One by one they entered the stone beside Chu Liyue's feet. Countless holes were torn in the void and for a time violent spatial turbulence surged. At first glance the surrounding space was like a soft and fragile piece of cloth that could be easily torn apart. However, these did not pose any threat to Chu Liyue. Those terrifying auras only lingered in their own positions and did not approach Chu Liyue at all. Of course, it was very likely that this was because the more terrifying part of the spatial energy was actually under her control. Chu Liyue raised his hand. A stone at his feet flew over and entered his interspatial ring. Then the second piece, the third piece. Chu Liyue was a little worried that the interspatial ring would not be able to withstand the power and pressure of these stones, but he was surprised to find that his worry was completely unnecessary. The interspatial ring didn't seem to be affected at all when the last stone entered it. It was silent, tolerant, and powerful. She stared at the interspatial ring and then said to Rongxiu, "This ring is really much more powerful than I expected." This ring was given to her by Rongxiu and it was the most precious treasure of the Yuntian Tower. Rongxiu smiled and said, "Yes. Of course, anything given to you is the best." Chu Liyue's heart warmed. Then she raised her eyes and looked forward with a slightly serious expression. Rongxiu asked, "Do you have the whereabouts of the zither score?" Chu Liyue nodded and then shook her head. "Actually, if I'm not wrong, that zither score should already be in my hands." Rongxiu raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment as if she was thinking about how to explain. Every note of the last zither score is hidden in the void. So just now when I used the two zither scores to summon the third one, such a scene appeared. The void was constantly twisting and collapsing, and vortexes appeared one after another. The third zither score was successfully summoned, but because it had completely merged with the void and was cut into 3,000 pieces in the end, there was not a single complete piece. Of course, to be precise, there were the broken tombstones. Now they were all lying in Chu Liyue's interspatial ring. In this way, it was not wrong to say that she had already obtained the zither score. It was just that she probably still needed to completely piece it together and reassemble it. No wonder Senior Ajing didn't notice the existence of the last zither score back then. Chu Liyue rubbed between her eyebrows, feeling a headache. She was the last one to realize this. In other words, the last zither score hasn't merged with the first two. Rongxiu said. Chu Liyue nodded. I guess I need to wait until I can completely control these stones. However, those represented the power of 3,000 spatial forces. Even though she already had a close connection with these spatial powers, how could it be so easy to completely control them? Even the stones she obtained from the high god tombs were occasionally not obedient, let alone these stones. Rongxiu nodded, his thin lips curling slightly. But the thing is already in your hands. Completely merging is only a matter of time. Yes. Chu Liyue let out a long sigh of relief. As long as she reassembled the last zither score and merged it with the first two, all the problems would be solved. Since this matter is over, we should return to the illusory god palace as soon as possible. I wonder how the two divine envoys are doing now. As she spoke, she saw Rongxiu raise his chin. I'm afraid we'll have to wait. Chu Liyue followed his gaze and raised her eyebrows. Lu Feng and Qi Han were still in the same place, enveloped in divine territory, constantly devouring the power around them. And the aura around them was several times stronger than before. Chu Liyue's eyes flashed as she murmured softly. Are they about to break through to Venerable God? Digression. I'm going out today. I don't want everyone to wait, so I'll owe you one. Mwah. Chapter 2336. As soon as she said that, Lu Feng's aura surged. Almost at the same time, a heavy pressure spread out from Qi Han's body. The two of them had both broken through to God. Chu Luiyue looked up at the sky. In the dark sky, the spatial rifts that had been torn apart were repairing themselves. But there was no Tianlei. Generally speaking, when one broke through to God, it would cause a huge commotion with the Tianlei. Those with greater talent and strength would even attract a golden Tianlei. Chu Luiyue had been like that. But now, perhaps because the lightning pool in the illusory god palace was sealed, there was no Tianlei at all. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Although the two of them had successfully broken through to God, it felt like something was missing. After a while, the surging aura around Lu Feng and Qi Han finally calmed down. The two of them stood up. Master. Chu Luiyue's lips curved into a smile. You two are really efficient. The threshold to God was not so easy to cross. For example, little Hachi showed no signs of breaking through until now. Not to mention that the energy here was chaotic. It was rare to be able to break through under such circumstances. You two should follow us back to the illusory god palace later, Chu Luiyue said thoughtfully. When the lightning pool opens, we can temper our divine bodies. The two of them answered in unison. Chu Luiyue looked ahead. The black wall stood in the distance. After such a big commotion, Senior Ajing did not respond. Chu Luiyue murmured strangely. She wanted to go and take a look, but after careful consideration, Chu Luiyue dismissed the idea. Senior Ajing was powerful. If he did not plan to come out, he must have his own considerations. She did not need to disturb him. Chu Luiyue made up her mind. Back to the illusory god palace. After making the decision, the group quickly returned. Since Lu Feng and Qi Han had broken through to the god realm, they moved very quickly. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the shore of the illusionary god ocean. Unlike the bustling atmosphere in the past, this place was completely empty. At a glance, there was only a tall man standing with his hands clasped behind his back. This back view looked somewhat familiar. As if sensing their movements, that person turned around. Senior Mao Zhen? It was indeed him. Chulu was very surprised. Why did you suddenly come? Mao Zhen stroked his beard. This old man has already laid down heavy guards at Divine Dragon Island. I thought that I should come here to take a look, so I came over. Now all the experts of the Divine Ruins world were heading over here. There was no need for him to say anything. With Mao Zhen around, Chu Luiyue immediately felt more at ease. She nodded her head and looked around her again. Why are you alone here? Mao Zhen said. When this old man came, there wasn't anyone here. I was just about to go up when I bumped into you guys. Hey, where did you guys go? Chu Luiyue smiled. Because of some matters, I returned to the god-slaying tomb. Mao Zhen was a little surprised. Didn't you say that the seventh divine envoy guards the heavenly gate very strictly? But this doesn't seem to be the first time she came out, right? Is the seventh divine envoy so easy to talk to? Chu Luiyue smiled and said, yes. Yeah, he didn't seem too happy. But so what? Mao Zhen was speechless. Looking at Chu Luiyue's nonchalant expression, Mao Zhen deeply felt that her question was really not up to standard. I should have known that this girl wouldn't be willing to reason under such circumstances. What a coincidence that we arrived at the same time. Mao Zhen chuckled. Even though this old man has long heard of the illusionary god palace, this is my first time here. Chu Luiyue had briefly chatted with him before. The great phoenix dragon's ancestor, Mao Lin, also came from the illusionary god palace. But later, these two ancient divine beasts left the illusionary god palace. Now Chu Luiyue already knew some of the rumors back then, so he guessed that the departure of the great phoenix dragon and the crimson gold heavenly phoenix should also be related to that incident. But the specific truth was hard to say. Chu Luiyue raised his hand. Senior Mao Zhen, please. Passing over the illusionary god sea again, Chu Luiyue could vaguely feel that he seemed to be able to vaguely feel that several spatial forces below were intertwining with each other. In the silence, undercurrents were surging. Chu Luiyue glanced down and frowned slightly. Rong Xiu noticed her movements and looked over. Chu Luiyue said softly, this illusionary god sea is really more powerful than expected. She had already faintly sensed that what she saw last time was actually just the tip of the iceberg. Diwu Zhangzi was trapped in the deepest part of this sea. If they wanted to rescue him, they indeed needed to make sufficient preparations. Then they successfully reached the silver bridge and walked toward the divine gate. Just as they arrived in front of the divine gate, the barrier opened automatically. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The so-called divine gate doesn't seem that difficult to enter? As Mao Zhen spoke, he stepped into it. Mio. Chu Liwei was about to stop him when he saw that Mao Zhen had already walked in. Then nothing happened. Everything was as usual. Chu Liwei waited for a while, but the seventh divine envoy didn't appear. Mao Zhen turned around and waved at them. What are you waiting for? Come here. Rong Xiu held Chu Liue's hand and walked in. Lu Feng and Qi Han followed closely behind. After entering, Chu Liue looked around. This place was empty as usual, but there seemed to be a slight difference. It seemed to be more deserted than before. The seventh god is so busy that he doesn't even guard the divine gate? Chu Liue narrowed his eyes slightly. Jin Yunlai wasn't such a person. Besides, even if he really had something to do, he could have asked the other divine envoys for help. But there was nothing. Perhaps he was delayed by something? Mao Zhen asked. What could be more important than guarding the divine gate? This was the only entrance to the illusory god palace. Its importance was needless to say. Swoosh. A sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from afar. Chu Liue and the others looked up and saw a figure passing through the air, heading in the direction of the illusory god palace. Wait, the illusory god palace? Chu Liue's heart skipped a beat as he stared at that person. He didn't turn in any other direction. He was heading straight for the illusory god palace. Soon another person was heading in another direction. He wasn't slow, as if he was in a hurry to do something. Chu Liue frowned slightly. The illusory god palace was sacred and honorable. Most people here could only look at it from afar. What was going on this time? Chu Liue hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's go and take a look." Chapter 23:37. They followed the star path to the palace of the illusory god. The deeper they went, the stranger Chu Liue felt. In the past, both sides of the star path were quite lively, but now it was deserted. It was really strange. Did the people here all go to the palace of the illusory god? Chu Liue murmured doubtfully. As soon as he finished speaking, he bumped into an acquaintance. Senior Xiao Ran? Seeing that familiar figure, Chu Liue immediately spoke. Xiao Ran had his arms crossed and was walking over lazily. When he heard this voice, he immediately turned around. He smiled when he saw Chu Liue. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Mao Zhen and the rest from the corner of his eyes. He had seen Rong Xiu before, but the other three were extremely unfamiliar. His heart skipped a beat and he guessed something. These few came with you this time? Chu Liue nodded and then introduced them. Senior Xiao Ran, this is Senior Mao Zhen. Hearing this name, Xiao Ran's expression changed slightly. Mao. Great Phoenix Dragon Clan? Senior Mao Zhen is the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. Chu Liue explained. Xiao Ran thought to himself. He felt that this person looked unusual just now, but her identity still surprised him. So it's clan leader Mao Zhen. Xiao Ran smiled and cupped his hands, but his heart was filled with emotions. This little girl was a bit too powerful. First, she made an agreement with the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Now it seemed that she had a good relationship with the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. It was difficult for ordinary people to even see an ancient divine beast, but she had a good relationship with both clans at the same time. Except for the fact that she didn't have a bloodline totem, everything else was really heaven-defying. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Feng and Qi Han behind him. These two, they looked very young, but they were already gods. Chu Liue glanced back. The two immediately bowed. Lu Feng, Qi Han, greet Senior Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran was very surprised. These two are also your subordinates? Chu Liue nodded. Xiao Ran was speechless. It was one thing for her to become a god at such a young age, but her subordinates were all so powerful as well. How could he let others live? Were these people really ordinary people from the Divine Ruins world who didn't even have a bloodline totem? Xiao Ran felt a sense of crisis and defeat. Chu Liue asked. Senior Xiao Ran, where are you going? I just saw that some people seem to be heading towards the palace of the illusory god. Xiao Ran said, Of course I'm going to watch the show. Well, that's right. You guys just came back, so you don't know yet. The Divine Lord is going to help the sixth Divine Envoy reconstruct his divine body. This kind of thing was hard to come by in 10,000 years, so everyone passed by. It was just a short sentence, but it contained too much information. Chu Liue's heart trembled violently. Divine Master. If he didn't guess wrong, wasn't that the Lord of the illusory god palace? The Divine Master. is coming out? No, Xiaoran said. The Divine Master is in charge of the palace of the illusory god and is extremely sacred. Other than the divine envoys, no one can see him. Besides, the Divine Master is extremely powerful. Even if he doesn't come out of the palace of the illusory god, it's easy for him to rebuild the divine body of the sixth divine envoy. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips and felt a bit disappointed. But when he thought about it carefully, it was actually normal. Even the palace of the illusory god was so difficult to enter, so the Divine Master was naturally even more difficult to meet. But if this was a small matter for the Divine Master, he could have done it in private. Why did he have to make it public? And the sixth divine envoy. The divine envoys are all powerful people. Why doesn't the sixth divine envoy have a divine body? Of course it's because... Xiaoran paused, looked around and then lowered his voice. The sixth divine envoy used to have a divine body, but I heard that he went out of the palace of the illusory god a while ago, and when he came back his divine body was already damaged. It wasn't a big deal. With the sixth divine envoy's identity and strength, he could go to the lightning pool and borrow the power of Tianlei to rebuild his divine body. But, isn't the lightning pool sealed? So now we can only ask the Divine Master for help. What happened to the sixth divine envoy that even his divine body was damaged? Chu Luiyue was very surprised. According to the ranking, the sixth divine envoy's status was slightly higher than the seventh divine envoy. How did he end up in such a state? Who knows? Xiaoran shook his head. Let's go and take a look. It's rare to see the Divine Master personally take action. Perhaps it would be beneficial to improve your cultivation after seeing it. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. Rebuilding a divine body. She was very experienced in this matter. But Xiaoran was right. After all, it was the Divine Master's action. The significance of it was incomparable. The group was about to go and take a look when they suddenly heard footsteps from the side. Chu Luiyue turned his head and saw that it was Yan Qing. Your Highness. He came in front of Rongxiu and bowed respectfully. Then he handed over a letter with both hands. An urgent letter from the Yuntian Tower. Please take a look. Rongxiu raised his hands to take it, opened it and glanced at it with narrowed eyes. A faint chill surged out of his body. Chu Luiyue asked curiously. Rongxiu, what's wrong? Rongxiu put the letter away. There's a small problem. For Rongxiu to say this, it definitely isn't a small trouble. Chu Luiyue said, then, do you want to go back and take a look? Rongxiu shook his head. I'll go back to my place first. I'll find you after I've taken care of the matter. Chu Luiyue nodded. There's no hurry. The Yuntian Tower is more important. As for the palace of the illusory god, she just wanted to see what was going on. Rongxiu nodded and took Yan Qing in another direction. Chu Luiyue also looked away. Let's go. Let's go to the palace of the illusory god. Of course, they couldn't enter the palace of the illusory god. They could only stand outside the door. When Chu Luiyue and the others arrived, hundreds of people had already gathered outside the palace of the illusory god. The place was bustling with noise and excitement. At this time they were all looking for something. Chu Luiyue took a closer look and saw that there was a bronze mirror in front of the door, which was quietly floating in midair. A figure gradually appeared in the bronze mirror. Is that the sixth oracle? Chapter 23:38. Someone asked. That shouldn't be the case. Wasn't the divine body of the sixth divine envoy already destroyed? Someone in the crowd immediately retorted. Then who is this? I know. He looks quite young. I haven't seen him before either. The person in the mirror had his head lowered so no one could see his face clearly. However, Chu Luiyue, who was standing behind the crowd, suddenly froze. That figure, that aura, she was clearly very familiar with it. A bold guess appeared in her mind, causing her to clench her fists. Her heart was hanging high in her throat. Following that person finally moved. He raised his hand and twisted his neck. His voice was lazy. So noisy. His voice was a little hoarse and he was faintly lacking in energy. However, that casual tone still shocked Chu Luiyue. Poncho. It's really him. She almost couldn't control herself as she quickly walked forward. There were already several layers of people in front of her. Originally, she wouldn't have been able to squeeze in, but at this moment her movements were extremely fast and clean. Please make way. Hearing the voice, A few people who were curiously staring at the mirror turned their heads impatiently. What are you squeezing for? When they saw that the person standing behind was actually Chu Liyue, their voices stopped abruptly. Chu Liyue tried her best to suppress the emotions in her heart as she repeated herself. I said please make way. How can you be so rude when you're asking for help? That face of his clearly had the words, get lost, written all over it, all right. A few people were dissatisfied and muttered to themselves. However, they didn't dare to offend her, so they all made way. You please, who didn't know that Chu Liyue was extremely arrogant in the Illusion God Palace? She even dared to talk back to the seventh divine envoy? She probably didn't cherish her life, and her combat strength was extremely strong. If she really wanted to be unreasonable, who could do anything to her? Thus, due to various considerations, no one wanted to provoke her. If they could, they would. If they could, they would. Soon, a wide path appeared in front of her. Chu Liyue thanked them and walked over. Xiaoran made a tisk sound. He had been in the illusory god palace for so many years, but he wasn't even half as intimidating as this little girl. There was really no comparison between people. Seeing that Mao Zhen and the others had already caught up, he also went forward with a smile. Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone. Many people around were secretly annoyed when they heard this, but they could only endure it. There was nothing he could do about it. There were some people he could not afford to offend. Chu Liyue quickly came to the front. Standing there, he was only 10 steps away from the bronze mirror. Thus he could clearly see everything inside. Her eyes were fixed on the person in the mirror. At this moment he was sitting on the ground with one of his long legs bent and his elbow resting on his knee. Even though he couldn't see his face clearly, Chu Liyue was certain of his identity just from his unique lazy and carefree aura. As if sensing something, he raised his head and looked over. A handsome and elegant face entered Chu Liyue's eyes. Her heart felt like it had been hammered by something. This was a completely unfamiliar face. She had seen countless faces that Lan Xiao had transformed into, but none of them were the same as this one. It turned out that this was his true appearance. But for some reason, the moment she saw this face, she was actually certain that he was him. Perhaps it was because that similar expression, as well as that playful gaze that had never changed from looking at the mortal world with a smile. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. Chu Liyue couldn't help but take half a step forward. However, just as she moved, she was stopped by an invisible barrier. Qi Han immediately asked in a low voice, Master, are you all right? Chu Liyue shook her head, indicating that she was fine. However, her gaze was still fixed on Lan Xiao. Obviously Lan Xiao could see her too. The moment their eyes met, he first revealed a hint of joy. Then he suddenly thought of something and a hint of anger appeared on his face. Chu Liyue noticed the change in his expression. Just as she was puzzled, she heard Lan Xiao cursing in a low voice. Mother ***, how ruthless. His voice wasn't loud, but Chu Liyue, who was standing nearby, heard it clearly. She frowned slightly. But in the next moment she knew why Lan Xiao had such a reaction. A long black whip suddenly fell and hit Lan Xiao's back harshly. Smack. The loud and sharp sound of the whip came suddenly and fiercely, instantly silencing everyone who was watching. Everyone was taken aback and subconsciously tensed up. Wasn't he helping the sixth divine envoy reconstruct her divine body? Then who was this young man who was being hit now? And this time it was extremely ruthless. With one whip, it immediately tore open the skin and flesh. Lan Xiao staggered from the hit and almost fell to the ground, but he managed to support himself with one arm. Dark red blood stains gradually spread from his shoulder. Even though the injury was on his back, everyone could guess how serious the injury was when they saw his pale face and trembling lips. The originally noisy crowd fell into dead silence. Chu Liyue clenched her teeth and stared at everything in the mirror. Lan Xiao seemed to be trapped in a cage at this moment. The surroundings were dark and cramped, and there was only a lamp hanging on the back wall. But that lamp was obviously left behind so that everyone could clearly see Lan Xiao's battered and exhausted appearance. Other than that, there were no other clues. It was impossible to determine where this was. Smack. That long whip fell again. Lan Xiao regained his senses, clenched his teeth and grabbed it with his bare hands. A muffled sound was heard. That long whip was caught in his hand. However, it was only for a moment. In the next second, that long whip was suddenly pulled out by an even stronger force, bringing a string of blood. Lan Xiao groaned and his hand was instantly a mess of flesh and blood. The moment he grabbed the long whip, countless sharp barbs grew out of it. The moment he touched that whip, Lan Xiao knew it was bad, but it was too late to stop. In the end he was hit by this. Lan Xiao lowered his head and looked at his hand. The wound was badly mutilated, and it was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood seeped out from the corner of his lips. He licked his lips, and the rich, sweet and fishy taste made his heart even more frustrated. "Huh, your methods are as dirty as always." Lan Xiao spat out a mouthful of blood, and his lips curled into an extremely evil smile as he scolded. Who was he talking to? The master god from the palace of the illusory god? But why did it sound like they already knew each other? Also, there seemed to be a deep hatred between the two of them. Chu Liwei had never seen Lan Xiao have such a strong hatred for anyone. No one answered his words, but that whip was raised again and brought down. This time it was aimed at Lan Xiao's face. Chapter 23:39. Lan Xiao cursed in his heart and attacked again. However, this time, the black whip's speed was even faster than his. Smack! A bloody gash appeared on Lan Xiao's face. The wound was at least an inch long and instantly destroyed half of his face. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be clenched tightly by something. Lan Xiao usually cared about his appearance the most, especially his current face, which was only restored after he reconstructed his godly body. Just like that, he lashed out in front of so many people. The impact on him was self-evident. Lan Xiao tilted his head and didn't move for a long time. The crowd in front of the bronze mirror held their breaths unconsciously. Even though the whip didn't hit them, they still felt a chill down their spines when they looked at it through the mirror. It landed on them. After a long time, Lan Xiao finally raised his hand and touched the wound on his face. It was extremely painful, sticky and sweet. The smile on his face gradually froze. Of course he knew why the other party did this. It was nothing more than using the most intense method to humiliate and trample him in all aspects. The other party knew what he cared about the most and purposely destroyed it. There was nothing more painful than this. Chu Liyue clenched her teeth, and a layer of coldness enveloped her body. She had to expend a lot of energy to restrain her urge to rush forward. What kind of hatred did the godly master of the palace of the illusory god have with Lan Xiao? Why did he use such a method to deal with him? He obviously wanted Lan Xiao to suffer a fate worse than death. At this moment, a low and hoarse voice came from the mirror. "These 3 whips are your punishment." This voice seemed to come from an extremely distant and empty place. Every word and sentence was divine and oppressive. Chu Liyue widened her eyes instantly and shock flashed across her eyes. This voice clearly belonged to the owner of that eye. Immediately after, the crowd behind her responded in unison. "Greetings, godly master." Instantly, it was as if a sudden clap of thunder exploded beside her ear, causing Chu Liyue's heart to tremble. Godly master, godly master? She had long suspected that the owner of the eye had some kind of close relationship with the palace of the illusory god. Otherwise, the illusion of the illusory god palace would not have appeared in the Red Moon Desert. The owner of that eye had only decided to attack them after luring them into it. However, Chu Liyue never would have thought that this person was actually the person with the highest status in the illusory god palace, and also the one who truly wielded power in the illusory god palace. For a moment, Chu Liyue's mind was in a mess. Countless thoughts were overturned at this moment, and countless guesses gushed out one after another, filling her mind, causing her to be in a state of confusion. She took a deep breath. Compared to the previous time in the Red Moon Desert, the sound this time was actually a little different. It was less sinister and cold and more sacred and dignified. Suddenly, it was very easy to make people feel respect and admiration and be willing to submit. Lan Xiao sneered. "Punishment? You think you can punish him just because you want to? Who gave you the right?" Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This person is so arrogant. How dare he speak to the master god like this? Xiao Ran seemed to have suddenly thought of something, and he looked at the person in the mirror suspiciously. "It can't be." Hearing his voice, Chu Liyue turned around and glanced at him. When she saw his expression, Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. "Senior Xiao Ran, know him?" Her voice was very soft, but the people around them were standing very close, so many of them heard it. Many people looked over. Xiao Ran looked conflicted. I'm not too sure either. I just feel that this person seems a little familiar." Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. This was the first time she had officially seen Lan Zhao's face. So why would Xiao Ran find him familiar? He was a Xian master, so he definitely would not make a mistake in this kind of thing. What do you mean? Chu Liwei asked sternly. Xiao Ran paused, hesitated for a while and then said, "From what I see, this person seems a little like Lord Second Priest." Second Priest? Chu Liwei asked instinctively. Who is that? Xiao Ran pursed his lips. It was obvious that he did not want to talk about this too much. This was the first time Chu Liwei saw such a worried look on his face. Suddenly, someone in the crowd asked in surprise. Second Priest. Is he the one who betrayed the Divine Master back then? Clearly, Xiao Ran was not the only one who had heard of this name. The crowd became restless. Seeing that the matter could no longer be hidden, Xiao Ran gritted his teeth and said, "Back then, other than the Divine Envoys, there were also 2 high priests by the Divine Master's side. Because the Divine Master was indebted to these 2 for teaching him, their status was higher than that of the first Divine Envoy. But back then, for some reason, the 2 high priests and the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix joined hands and betrayed the illusory God Palace. I thought that the 2 high priests had died in that chaotic battle, but who knew?" He sighed. In that battle back then, countless cultivators in the illusory God Palace were killed or injured. Even the Divine Envoys were all killed at that time. What? Chu Liwei was shocked. All the Divine Envoys were killed? Then the ones now, they were chosen by the Divine Master later on. Xiao Ran said. That battle was very intense. Because he was young back then, he was lucky enough to escape death and only saw it from afar. But it had been tens of thousands of years and he could no longer remember clearly what happened back then. So when Lan Shao appeared, he didn't recognize him immediately. But when he heard this voice, he recalled the past buried deep in his memory. Back then, the second priest was also so arrogant and unbridled. Because there weren't many people left in the illusory God Palace at that time, and later the higher-ups ordered them not to spread the news, so no one dared to mention it again. Coincidentally, Xiao Ran was one of them. Chu Liyue's temples throbbed and the blood in her body was about to boil. She opened her mouth and asked, "Then, what about the other high priest?" "You mean the high priest?" Xiao Ran frowned and thought carefully for a while before shaking his head. That person made the same choice as the second priest back then. Since the second priest is still alive, then, maybe the high priest is still alive too. I just don't know why the Divine Master didn't kill the 2 high priests after they committed such a crime. Instead he kept them until now and suddenly let them out? High priest, high priest. Chu Liyue's heart seemed to be surging crazily. She tried her best to control herself and asked softly, "Senior Xiao Ran, do you know the high priest's name?" Xiao Ran shook his head. What kind of status did the 2 high priests have back then? How would I know this? Chu Liyue didn't give up. Then, what about their appearance? Since you've seen the second priest, then you should know the high priest too, right? This. Xiao Ran thought for a while. I can't remember anything else. I only remember that the high priest wore the purple gold divine armor and had unparalleled divine power. Chapter 2340. In an instant Chu Liyue's brain buzzed. Purple gold. Godly armor? She murmured subconsciously. Then she lowered her eyes and looked at the interspatial ring on her hand. There was a purple scale armor there, silent. Yes. Rumor has it that the purple gold godly armor was the #1 armor in the world, personally forged by the high priest. It's a pity that the purple gold godly armor was damaged in that great battle, and the high priest himself. Xiao Ran shook his head. 10,000 years had passed and the few memories he had in the first place had also become blurry. However, the scene of the fire burning in the palace of the illusory god, the flames soaring into the sky and the godly armor falling apart, was deeply engraved in his mind. Even though he hadn't taken the initiative to think about it all these years, thinking about it now still made him sigh. It's not just me. Everyone who survived back then also thought that the 2 high priests had died. In the years that followed, the Divine Master reappointed the Divine Envoys, but no new high priests were chosen. Naturally, there were even fewer people who brought this up. Chu Liyue fell silent and turned to look at the bronze mirror. High priest, second high priest. So this was the true identity of Debao and Lan Shao. How were they dead? They were clearly suppressed in the Red Moon Desert and couldn't come out for 10,000 years. Chu Liyue was a little dazed and she couldn't recover for a long time. Ever since they were captured and brought to the palace of the illusory god, Chu Liyue didn't think that they might be from here. But She would never have thought that these two people would have such honorable statuses. Then other than the two of them, what about Wu Xianxia? Thinking of this, she immediately asked. Senior Xiaoran, is there a third high priest in the palace of the illusory god? Xiaoran shook his head. Oh. After so many years, the palace of the illusory god only had those two high priests. Chu Liyue's brows furrowed tightly. If Wu Xianxia wasn't a high priest, then what was his identity? Why was he imprisoned in the same place as Dabao and Lan Shao? She faintly felt that she seemed to have touched on some long-buried truth, but at the same time, there were many questions in front of her, making it difficult for her to distinguish. She clenched her fists and took a deep breath. Only then did she gradually feel her strength recover a little. The amount of information she had just received was simply too much, causing her entire body to go numb. Seeing that Chu Liyue's expression didn't seem right, Xiaoran asked worriedly, "What happened to you?" Chu Liyue forced a smile and shook his head. "It's nothing. It's just that I suddenly know so many secrets. It's a little hard for me to digest them all at once." Xiaoran immediately understood. This was normal. It would be difficult for anyone to react quickly after hearing so much at once. He comforted her. "Actually, it's all in the past. Don't take it to heart." Chu Liyue didn't say anything. This matter concerned Dabao, Lan Shao and Wu Xianxia. How could she not care? No wonder the profound formations that Dabao had given her back then overlapped so much with the ones on the star path. As the high priest, wasn't it normal for him to know this? She closed her eyes and tossed aside the distracting thoughts in her mind. Then she stared straight ahead. In the mirror, Lan Shao sneered. He could hear what they were saying. His reaction had already explained everything. "Lan Shao, you betrayed the palace of the illusory god back then, which was a capital offense. On account of our many years of friendship, I didn't take your life. I thought that 10,000 years would be enough for you to reflect, but now it seems that you're still as stubborn as ever. Since that's the case, today I'll use your divine body to reconstruct the divine body of the sixth divine envoy. This way you'll die a worthy death." That voice was still dignified. Every word and sentence was like a holy judgment. Lan Shao sneered and scolded, "Bah. I don't have any **t relationship with you. Don't **king flatter yourself. Oh right, I almost forgot, you don't have a face." Smack. The black whip suddenly lashed out. After this whip flew out, it actually wrapped tightly around Lan Zhao's right arm. Drops of blood seeped out. Lan Zhao's facial features were distorted for a moment, and his face became even paler. It was obvious that this had caused him great pain. However, he actually endured it and didn't even let out a cry of pain. Chu Liyue's heart was in her throat. That person wanted to use Lan Shao to reconstruct the divine body of the sixth divine envoy. What kind of method would that person use? After all, Lan Zhao's divine body was also reconstructed with great difficulty. Suddenly, her eyebrows twitched. Wait. There were 5 golden tianlei in Lan Zhao's body. Previously, Xiaoran said that the lightning pool had been sealed, so the divine master wanted to do it personally. Then, this time he actually wanted to forcefully take away the power of the tianlei in Lan Zhao's body and let the sixth god use it. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared beside Lan Shao without a sound. "The sixth divine envoy." Someone in the crowd exclaimed. Needless to say, Chu Liyue could also tell that this translucent figure was the sixth divine envoy. But why did it look strangely familiar? Chu Liyue subconsciously frowned. At this moment, the sixth divine envoy suddenly turned his head. That was a face that Chu Liyue would never forget no matter what. Her heart pounded as she blurted out in shock. Immerse. Chapter 2341. This person was indeed Immerse, who had self-destructed and escaped. Chu Liyue had been secretly sending people to investigate Immerse's whereabouts, but there had been no progress. She never expected that he was the sixth divine envoy. His divine body was destroyed. It was just that he had no choice but to self-destruct. Many people turned to look at her when they heard her voice. Xiaoran asked curiously, "You know the sixth divine envoy?" That person had just returned a while ago. Logically speaking, she shouldn't have seen him before, right? And looking at her, it was obvious that she knew him long ago. Chu Liyue pursed her lips tightly. "I guess so. However, it was the kind of acquaintance that made enemies." Xiaoran was stunned. Chu Liyue sneered. They all said that the sixth divine envoy went out and only returned recently. But it turns out that he went to the divine ruins world? How interesting. Hearing her say this, Xiao Ran suddenly understood something. So she had seen him in the divine ruins world. But looking at Chu Liyue, it seemed like she had a deep enmity towards the sixth divine envoy. He thought for a while, but seeing Chu Liyue's tense and cold jaw, he swallowed his words. Of course, Mo Shiqian also saw Chu Liyue. A deep sense of fear and dread flashed across his eyes. Then he remembered that they were already in the illusory god palace, and Chu Liyue couldn't barge in and do anything. Only then did he relax a little. Thinking about the situation, Mo Shiqian's lips curled into a cold smile. Then he looked at Lan Xiao. Second priest, it seems that I'll have to trouble you this time. Lan Xiao sneered. Who do you think you are? How dare you fight with me? This golden Tianlei power, even if I take the initiative to give it to you, can you afford it? His words were full of ridicule and contempt. Obviously he didn't take Mo Shiqian seriously at all. I heard that you died very miserably back then. Why, now that only half of your soul is left, what are you still dreaming about? These two simple sentences accurately hit Mo Shiqian's sore spot. Firstly, his status was indeed incomparable to Lan Zhao's. Secondly, as a god's messenger, he was forced to self-destruct and escape by Chu Liyue. It was indeed embarrassing if word got out. After all, at that time Chu Liyue's cultivation level was actually lower than his. Of course, this was also because a portion of his memories and strength had been sealed at that time. It was only after returning to the illusory god palace that he finally recovered. However, this only made him even more terrified. Because only at that moment did he realize what he had done in the past and offended those existences that he shouldn't have offended. After returning, Mo Shiqian stayed in his room for a long time. He was always on tenterhooks, afraid that the punishment would come. But for some reason, after such a long time, there was still no movement at all. And now the God Lord wanted to help him reconstruct his god body. He finally calmed down. This also meant that the God Lord had made up his mind to protect him. Therefore, when he saw Chu Liyue now, although he still felt fear subconsciously, he wasn't too worried. After all, everything he did was to help the God Lord snatch the Guqin score. Thinking of this, Mo Shiqian felt more confident. Second priest, when you betrayed the God Lord and the illusory god palace, you committed a capital crime. It's already the God Lord's mercy that you're still alive today. But not only are you ungrateful, you're also arrogant and don't have any remorse. What right do you have to criticize me? Lan Zhao's eyelids twitched. Dog, you're ugly enough. Don't talk so much so that you don't dirty my ears. You, Mo Shiqian was instantly enraged. No one would be happy to hear such words. But his rationality was still there. He knew that the more it was like this, the more he couldn't make a scene. Anyway, the God Lord and so many people were watching. This Lan Xiao could only be punished and humiliated. No matter how good his words were, the punishment and torture that he deserved would not be any less. Rip, there was the sound of clothes tearing. It was that black whip that wrapped around Lan Zhao's arm, and with a sudden tug, it tore his sleeve into pieces. Under the tattered clothes there were bloody wounds. Lan Xiao cursed and blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Chu Liyue's heart trembled. That person planned to tear Lan Zhao's arm off just like that. The 5 golden Tianlei turned into his limbs and essence core, which helped him reconstruct his divine body. Now that the power of the Tianlei was forcefully extracted, then Chu Liyue didn't dare to think about it anymore. Her mind spun wildly as she kept thinking. What other way could she save Lan Xiao? Countless thoughts appeared in her mind, but she rejected them. How could this be so easy? The person who wanted to harm Lan Xiao was the God Lord of the illusory god palace. In this place, who else had a higher status than him? She couldn't do it forcefully. She might die before saving Lan Xiao. Who would be able to stop all of this openly? Lan Xiao gritted his teeth and used all his strength to resist. But everything was under the other party's control. If he could resist the other party, he wouldn't have been forcefully brought back and locked up. Now he could only hold on for a short while, even if he tried his best. This continued. The crisp sound of bones breaking suddenly sounded. That arm of Lan Zhao's suddenly presented an extremely strange posture. The power of the black whip was too shocking and it directly tore his arm off. The crowd quietened down. The atmosphere became deadly silent. Many people had complicated expressions and different reactions as they looked at the scene in front of them. All these years, the God Lord had been staying in the Illusion God Palace and had never come out. All the big and small matters in the Illusion God Palace were handed over to the God emissaries. Now that the God Lord finally made a move, he actually wanted to tear apart the second priest's divine body in front of everyone and forcefully extract his power to transfer to the sixth God emissary. Although the second priest chose to betray back then and deserved to be executed, this method was indeed too bloody and cruel. This was definitely more painful and torturous than killing him directly. Actually, to the many cultivators in the Illusion God Palace, they had seen all kinds of fighting and killing scenes. To be able to reach their current cultivation level, which one of them didn't have blood on their hands? But the scene in front of them couldn't help but make some people feel uncomfortable. It was good that the God Lord wanted to help the sixth God emissary reconstruct his divine body, but he obviously wanted to use this opportunity to punish the second priest and make an example out of him at the same time. But the God Lord was the God Lord after all. It was not up to them to judge what was right or wrong. Rip. A piece of flesh on Lan Zhao's arm was violently torn apart. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. A bright golden light appeared and flickered silently. Because he used the golden Tianlei to reconstruct his divine body, Lan Zhao's bones were also golden. Soon after, the black whip tightened again. Chapter 2342. At this moment, a stream of light suddenly broke through the air. Chu Liwei heard the noise and looked up instinctively. It was actually a golden stream of light. It was dazzling, holy and powerful. It was wrapped in a heavy pressure, causing people to unconsciously feel reverence and submission. In an instant, the stream of light fell into the palace of the illusory god. Then Chu Liwei and the others saw that the black whip that was tightly binding Lan Zhao's arm was suddenly covered by the golden light. In the next moment, the black whip seemed to have encountered something terrifying and quickly retreated. When Zhou Xian saw this scene, a deep look of shock flashed across his face. He took a few steps back uncontrollably and almost fell to the ground. He looked like he was in a sorry state. Lan Zhao's tense body suddenly relaxed. When he saw the golden stream of light, he closed his eyes and finally heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, he made a move. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. What was going on? Someone made a move and forcibly stopped the Divine Master. That low and hoarse voice contained a trace of suppressed anger as it asked in a deep voice, "What's the matter? Emperor, are you trying to interfere with the palace of the illusory god?" Instantly, this voice spread far and wide and clearly fell into everyone's ears. Almost everyone's face was filled with disbelief. Chu Liwei was also shocked. Emperor. It was actually this person who made a move. Xiao Ran, who was beside him, murmured, "How is this possible? Didn't the emperor never get involved in these things? How come this time?" Chu Liue's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Xiao Ran and asked seriously, "Senior Xiao Ran, what is going on? What is the emperor's identity? Since he is so respected, why can't he interfere with the palace of the illusory god?" Xiao Ran took a deep breath and explained, "Because he is not the master of the palace of the illusory god. The emperor's status is indeed unparalleled because he is the one who inherited the heavenly Tao and controls thousands of deities in the world. Even the Divine Master can't be compared to him. Even the Divine Master was personally enlightened by the emperor to ascend to the heavens and become a deity. However, the monarch has never cared about anything. Even when the palace of the illusory god caused a ruckus, the monarch didn't interfere, right? However, I don't know what happened today, but it actually alarmed the emperor. His intention for stopping the Divine Master in front of so many people was obvious. Chu Liue's mind was full of thoughts. So that was how it was. No wonder the Divine Master had such a big reaction. Everyone present was also shocked. The Celestial Emperor's sudden move also showed his attitude. How could it not cause others to overthink? Then a figure slowly appeared in the void. Chu Liue looked up and frowned. This person was not an emperor, but the one who had appeared at Herb Mountain that day. Just like last time, this person did not reveal his face or figure this time. He only said indifferently, "The emperor had no such intention." Today he acted only to punish the sixth divine envoy. As soon as he finished speaking, the bronze mirror fell into a dead silence. Zhou Xian's legs went weak and he looked panicked. He almost knelt on the ground. "It's coming. It's still coming. What did the sixth oracle do wrong? After a long while the divine master spoke. However, the anger and forbearance from before seemed to have dissipated a lot. The man chuckled. What did he do wrong? Those who should know clearly know. The divine master said no more. Chu Liuyue's eyes flashed. There was a deep meaning in his words. Immerse had done a lot of things in the world of divine ruins. This divine master obviously knew about it. Yes, the first divine envoy had sent Jiu Long and Shi Yan, two divine envoys, to the god-slaying tomb to find the last Guqin score. It was obvious that the divine master wanted it. In this way all the things that Immerse had done to her could be explained. But this seemed to have angered the emperor. Immerse can't be the sixth divine envoy. Since that's the case, why waste time and energy to reconstruct his divine body? That person laughed. Now that the emperor wants his life, you want to fight with the emperor? After a long while that low and hoarse voice finally sounded. I don't dare. But the second priest's identity is special, especially to the palace of the illusory god. You don't need the emperor to remind you of this, right? Of course, if you insist you can continue. But someone has to bear the consequences. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Chu Liyue finally heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he didn't intend to interfere in Lan Zhao's matter, but in fact he had blocked all paths. The divine master of the palace of the illusory god had no choice. Lan Zhao's life was saved. Sure enough, after a long silence that voice said, since this is the emperor's intention then, let's forget about it. But the second priest's mistake back then cannot be forgiven. He will still be detained in the palace of the illusory god and never be released. Lan Zhao cursed and sneered. Don't worry. I've lived longer than you. Wasn't it just enduring? He had endured so many years. What was this short time? Sooner or later. The next moment that golden light flew out and easily trapped Immerse. Everyone only heard a short and hurried scream. Then Immerse's figure disappeared. All that was left was a streak of golden light that flew out from within. The figure in the void raised his hand and caught that light. Then he left without hesitation. Almost at the same time, the bronze mirror floating in the air also flew out quickly and disappeared behind the door of the palace of the illusory god. The commotion ended abruptly just like that. Everyone didn't even have time to figure out what had happened before they realized that everything had calmed down. Many people looked at each other. Clearly they hadn't digested what had just happened. Chu Liyue rubbed his forehead and sighed softly. No matter what, Lan Zhao had escaped. Also, after this incident, the divine master of the palace of the illusory god shouldn't do anything similar to him anymore. It wasn't hard to tell from the words just now that Lan Zhao had a trump card that made the other party wary. As for what it was hard to say, but it was still a good thing. I wonder how Immerse offended the emperor. He was actually stripped of his position as the sixth divine envoy? Xiao Ran murmured strangely. Chu Liyue clenched his fists. Because he was too nervous just now, his hands were cold and numb. Only now did they recover slightly. The commotion is over. Go back. At the same time, the divine envoys in the palace of the illusory god all had different reactions when they heard what had happened to Immerse. Bang! She swept all the things on the table to the floor with a single sweep. This Immerse, how dare he lie to me? Chapter 2343. The bottles and jars on the table fell to the ground and shattered instantly. All kinds of pills rolled out. A rich medicinal fragrance instantly filled the air. But at this moment Xu Jing only felt nauseous when she smelled this smell. Because this only reminded her of how she had done her best to help Immerse refine medicine during this period of time. She knew that Immerse went out to help the divine master. So after Immerse came back, she tried her best to please him. Immerse lost his divine body? It was obvious that he had done his best for the divine master and accidentally ended up like this. Since it was already like this, even if he didn't take credit, he should at least take credit for his hard work. The divine master would definitely treat Immerse differently because of this and take special care of him, right? This was Xu Jing's truest and most certain thought. She was ranked 8th and did not have an advantage. Some time ago she had angered the emperor. Not only did she lose control of the Herb Mountain, but she also almost lost the position of the 8th divine envoy. Of course she needed to rope in a backer. The 6th divine envoy Immerse was the person she chose. Although his ranking was not at the top, he was still stronger than her. Moreover, he had damaged his divine body for the divine master. Once he recovered, wouldn't his future be limitless? The other divine envoys were all capable. They knew that she was already disliked by the emperor, so why would they come to her side? Therefore, after many considerations, only the sixth divine envoy was the best choice. Even if Xiu Xian was gloomy and suspicious and spoke rudely several times, she endured it. She only wanted to wait for him to reconstruct his divine body so that he could be of help. Later, when she heard that the divine master would personally make a move, she was even more delighted. This meant that Xiu Xian's status on the divine master's side was definitely not low. Therefore, early in the morning she began to wait excitedly. Who knew that after waiting for so long, not only did Xiu Xian not reconstruct his divine body, but she also received the emperor's punishment. Xiu Xian's position as the divine envoy was revoked and he was even taken away. Even a fool would know that what awaited him was only a dead end. And all her previous thoughts were in vain. Xu Jing was still angry, so she smashed everything in the room again. From the looks of it, Xiu Xian knew that he had offended the emperor, but he did not say anything. As long as there was a chance to salvage the situation, the divine master would not give up on him so easily. Xu Jing hated Xiu Xian to the core. Although she had kept a low profile, the divine envoys of the palace of the illusory god should know that she had been helping Xiu Xian recently. Now that Xiu Xian was like this, she might be implicated. This was truly one disaster after another. Jin Yunlai happened to pass by the door and heard the sounds of things being smashed. She stopped in her tracks and shook her head. Xu Jing was really too smart for his own good. She thought that everything was under her control, but she didn't know that many things had already deviated from the original track. In the end, the one who was tricked the most was the one who suffered the most. Xiu Xian's position as the divine envoy had been revoked, which proved that the emperor's previous warning was not just for show. If Xu Jing continued like this, it would end up the same way sooner or later. But actually, his own situation wasn't any better. Thinking of what had happened before, he clenched his fists and continued to walk forward. Chu Luiyue and the others walked towards their residence. But after taking a few steps, a figure appeared out of the corner of her eye. She stopped in her tracks and looked in that direction. In the distance, a person was kneeling under the wall of the palace of the illusory god. Mu Yafeng. Unlike before, her clothes were a little messy and a few strands of her hair were scattered. She knelt there silently with her head lowered, looking very disheveled. Obviously, she didn't want to kneel. What happened to her? Chu Luiyue asked. Xiao Ran followed her line of sight and clicked her tongue. You mean her? As she was caught cheating on the star path. She has been kneeling for a few days. Cheating? Yes. I heard that the seventh divine envoy taught her a lot in private, which allowed her to break several Xian arrays in succession. The first divine envoy found out about this and punished her severely. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Previously, she did find it a little strange because she knew clearly that Mu Yafeng's talent was not enough to support her breaking those Xian arrays in succession. But at that time she was busy with her own matters and didn't pay much attention to it. She didn't expect that Jin Yunlai helped her in private. The seventh divine envoy. Why would she do this? Wasn't this a little too bold? Who knows? Anyway, not only was Mu Yafeng punished by kneeling, she was also stripped of the right to walk the star path. From now on, she is not allowed to take a step on the star path. Xiao Ran laughed, but his expression was a little cold. Now, many people are suspecting that her previous performance was due to the help of the seventh divine emissary. Things had become so ugly, it was no wonder that people would think so much. But if she can't walk the star path, doesn't that mean that she can no longer enter the palace of the illusory god and ascend to the heavens and become a god? Yes. But who can be blamed for this? Xiao Ran shrugged. Originally, if she cultivated honestly and comprehended one by one, there might be some hope. But now she couldn't take it anymore and cut off all her escape routes. She just deserved it. He didn't know how many years he had been trapped in the last Xian formation, but he didn't think of using any other methods. This Mu Yafeng was so powerful that she could make the seventh divine envoy do this for her. Chu Luiyue paused. Didn't the seventh divine envoy help to plead for mercy? How can the seventh divine envoy care about this? Now even he has been stripped of the right to control the star path. By the way, you just came back, so you don't know about this. Chu Luiyue didn't know what to say for a moment. She had only been away for a short period of time and so many things had happened. Then who is in charge of the Star Path now? I heard that it was handed over to the 5th Divine Envoy. But the 5th Divine Envoy isn't a Xian master and I don't know why the 1st Divine Envoy chose him. We all thought that he would choose the 11th Divine Envoy who is also a Xian master. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. By the way, the 9th and 10th Divine Envoys left the Divine Gate. Have they returned? Xiaoran nodded. They returned a long time ago. But these two aren't in the Illusory God Palace now, but in the Illusory God Ocean. I heard that they made some mistakes. But we don't have the right to ask and we only know the general idea. Mistakes. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Was it because they didn't succeed in bringing back the music score? But at that time in the God-slaying tomb the two disappeared inexplicably. She didn't expect that they would be locked in the Illusory God Ocean after returning. She suddenly thought of something and asked. Senior Xiaoran, have you seen the 1st Divine Envoy? He had even seen Lan Xiao and the others. Logically speaking, he should have some understanding of the 1st Divine Envoy, right? Xiaoran paused. Are you asking about the previous one or the current one? Digression, 6 o'clock. Chapter 2344. Chu Luiyue blinked and asked curiously, You've met these two before? Xiaoran nodded then shook his head. You can say that. But I've only seen them from afar. I don't really know them. Not to mention the previous one, he was still young at that time and didn't have much of an impression of him. And the current one. She was also very low-key and mysterious, rarely showing her face. Although Xiaoran had stayed in the Illusory God Palace for a long time, he hadn't fully comprehended all the Xian formations on the Star Path and entered the Illusory God Palace, so he hadn't been able to get close to the 1st Divine Envoy. Not to mention him, even the other Divine Envoys couldn't see the 1st Divine Envoy's face in recent years. I wonder what the 1st Divine Envoy is busy with. I can't describe it, but if I see him I'll definitely recognize him. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips, feeling a little disappointed. Seeing her reaction, Xiaoran couldn't help but laugh. Why? You seem to be very curious about the 1st Divine Envoy? Chu Luiyue's lips curved. There shouldn't be anyone in the Illusory God Palace who isn't curious about this, right? Actually, if you really want to see him, you can wait a few more months. Xiaoran raised his chin. The gate of heaven will open for a year. When the time is up, the gate of heaven will close. At that time, all the cultivators in the Illusory God Palace can enter the Illusory God Palace. At that time all the Divine Envoys will appear, including the 1st Divine Envoy. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered. Really? Of course. This is the old rule of the Illusory God Palace. The gate of heaven opens once every 10,000 years and every time, it will attract many cultivators, but in the end, only a few can ascend to the heavens and become gods. There's no need to talk about those who succeed. Those who fail are either driven out of the gate of heaven and left to fend for themselves, or forced to stay here and continue to cultivate, waiting for the next gate of heaven to open. But there aren't many who can really endure it. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. So, the opportunity to ascend to the heavens and become gods only comes once every 10,000 years. Yes. Xiaoran said with a self-mocking smile. My strength and luck were both a little lacking. I stayed at the final profound formation for several years, but I still didn't make any progress. Even after so long, he still hadn't succeeded. To be honest, I don't even know how long I've been waiting. Over time he had come to terms with it. It would be best if he could comprehend the Xian formation, complete the Star Path, and enter the Illusory God Palace to wait for his breakthrough. If I can't do it, I'll just muddle along. Chu Luiyue said softly, You can definitely do it. Xiaoran didn't care about it and placed his hands behind his head. Forget it, there's nothing much to see here. Let's go back. Chu Luiyue and the others returned to their residence. However, Mao Zhen did not travel with them. Instead she chose a different direction. It probably had something to do with the great phoenix dragon's ancestor, so Chu Luiyue did not ask further. Rong Xiu was resting in the room, but Yan Qing had already disappeared. Hearing the footsteps, Rong Xiu looked up. Has the matter at the Yuntian Tower been resolved? Chu Luiyue asked. Rong Xiu nodded. It's all a small matter. Don't worry. This for you. I heard that Senior Lan Xiao appeared? Yes. Chu Luiyue's expression turned serious as she briefly repeated what happened. Luckily it was a close call. Senior Lan Xiao should be temporarily safe for a period of time after this. It's a pity that he's trapped in the illusory god palace. It's really difficult to find where he's imprisoned. It's even more difficult to rescue him. Rong Xiu kissed her forehead. The more it's like this, the more we can't be too hasty. I know. Chu Liyue sighed softly and then said, besides, I really didn't expect Senior Lan Xiao to be the second priest of the illusory god palace. And Dabao. Diwu Zhang's identity could not be confirmed yet, but there was no doubt that these two people were priests. Rong Xiu lowered his eyes and did not speak. Chu Liyue thought for a while and said, the illusory god palace is also searching for the music score. Now that I'm back, there's no reason they don't know that it's with me now. Why haven't they done anything yet? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. The music score has already recognized you as its owner. Even if they want to snatch it, can they? That's true. Now Chu Liyue had the upper hand. The music score was obviously very important to the illusory god palace. The more important it was, the more cautious they would be and would not dare to act rashly. Especially now that the three music scores were all with her, they had become Chu Liyue's life-saving trump card. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment and said, I plan to rest for a while first, then directly complete the star path and officially enter the illusory god palace. Rong Xiu looked at her. When the time comes, I'll go with you. Lan Zhao's matter could be considered to have come to an end for the time being. After the commotion, Chu Liyue was much more relieved. Dabao and Lan Zhao's identities were so special, and it was obvious that they had a certain trump card that made the other party wary. In that case, there would be ample room to make more preparations for the rescue of them. As for Diwu Zhangzi, although he was not a priest, he was locked up together with Dabao and Lan Xiao, so there was probably some connection between them. At least now they knew where he was locked up. Chu Liyue had just taken back the last music score, so she planned to use this time to integrate the third music score. In the room, Chu Liyue sat cross-legged, surrounded by a layer of silver-red flowing light. Soon, a stone rolled out from the universe ring on her hand and floated quietly in the divine realm. The space around the stone distorted for a moment, but it quickly returned to normal. Then the second stone, the third stone. Soon Chu Liyue was surrounded by these stones. She closed her eyes and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. The bright light shone on her face and her skin was clear and white like jade. She followed the tone of the music in her memory and began to arrange the stones around her. She had heard the complete music score once in the god-slaying tomb, so what she needed to do now was to integrate these scattered pieces of music and then combine them with the first two pieces. Chapter 2345. This was easier said than done. Chu Liyue had tried it once in the god-slaying mound, but she did not succeed. The third score had been cut too thoroughly. She held her breath and raised her hands gently. The stones began to arrange themselves in a certain order. However, even if Chu Liyue followed the tune she heard and placed them in the correct position one by one, it did not go as smoothly as she had expected. Because there seemed to be an invisible barrier between these stones, and they even faintly contradicted each other. The more stones gathered together, the more obvious this resistance was. Chu Liyue's brows gradually furrowed. Finally, at a certain moment, the stones in front of her scattered with a loud bang. Chu Liyue opened her eyes. She realized that with her current strength, it was basically impossible for her to completely control it. Even if she was already a god, when these stones did not listen to her, she really could not do anything about it. Every single one of them contained the aura of a Dao sovereign. Chu Liyue was not satisfied and tried a few more times. But no matter what method she used, the final result was the same. In the end, Chu Liyue finally chose to give up. Forget it. She stood up and put away the divine territory and the stones. It was probably useless to force it now. She lifted her feet and walked out. Treasure Pavilion, second floor. In the room, Yan Gu was lying on a small couch, playing with a divine weapon in his hands in boredom. Sigh, he let out a long sigh and turned over. When will these days come to an end? Ever since he returned to the Illusion God Palace, he had been on the second floor for a long time, not daring to step out of the door. Who would not feel suffocated? Knock knock. Second master. That was Mingshu's voice. Yan Gu said lazily. Come in. Zhao pushed the door open and came to Yan Ji's side, handing over the things in his hands. Second master, this is this month's account book. Please take a look. Yenji's eyelids twitched. There hasn't been much business this month. What's there to look at? Tisk. Although the number of people who came here to buy herbs had decreased after the herb mountain reopened, there were still many other businesses in the store. Is it really okay for you to be so casual? Yengu glanced at him. Are you scolding me? Mingshu immediately said, this subordinate dares not. Yengu snorted but still took the account book and flipped it open. You can hide your thoughts a little deeper. His lips twitched and he cleverly changed the topic. Second master, you've been here for a long time. Why hasn't the first master said anything? At the mention of this, Yengu felt wronged. He let out a long sigh. Sigh, there's nothing we can do about it. Since his master had given his orders, he naturally had to obey. However, I heard that Madam has been quite active recently. I reckon that victory is in sight. Mingshu smiled. I heard that second master and Madam are old acquaintances. When he sees you he will definitely be very happy. Yenji's brows twitched. Hiss. Based on his understanding of that person, if he knew that the second master of Treasure Pavilion was him, then, when the time came, would he still have a way out? Thinking of this, Yengu hurriedly said, no hurry, no hurry. It wouldn't be too late to talk about this when his master also decided to show up. At least he could block it for a while, right? As Yengu spoke, he flipped a few more pages and couldn't help but rub his forehead. Sigh, I really don't want to read this. If the third oracle is still. His voice stopped abruptly. Mingshu's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly heard a commotion outside. Master Mingshu? It was Chu Liyue's voice. Yengu and Mingshu quickly exchanged glances. Yengu was quick to react. He stuffed the account book back into Mingshu's hands and disappeared in a flash. His actions were as fast as lightning. Mingshu, Master Mingshu, are you there? Chu Liyue waited on the first floor for a while. Seeing that there was no one, he decided to go upstairs to take a look. After calling out twice, Mingshu finally pushed open a door and walked out. Miss Shangguan, you, call me Madame Rong. Chu Liyue said. Since Rong Xiu was here, this title was more appropriate. Mingshu's eyelids twitched. Yes, madam. Chu Liyue vaguely felt that it was a little strange. She wanted to correct him but thought that it wasn't a big deal, so she didn't mention it. Master Mingshu, I'm here this time to copy the rest of the mythical flame diagram. Mingshu had expected that she was here for the mythical flame diagram, but he was still stunned when he heard her words. Oh, all of it. Chu Liyue nodded slightly. There seemed to be a faint glow in his clear black eyes. Yes, all of it. Peach Blossom Cove. You mansion. Sanson held the account book and walked unsteadily through the corridor with small steps. Suddenly, his nose felt itchy and he sneezed. Achoo. This sound made him dizzy and his vision blurred. Damn, who's talking about me behind my back? He subconsciously looked at the silver bridge in the sky. Sigh, I wonder how Master and the others are doing now. At this moment, Wu Yao hurried over. Third brother. Sanson rubbed his nose. When he turned around, he saw that Wu Yao's expression was a little strange. He blinked his small eyes. What's wrong? What happened? Why are you in such a hurry? Wu Yao quickly walked to him and said in a low voice. Third brother, there's a problem in the Daoist world. Chapter 2346. When Sanson heard this, he immediately put away the account book. What's going on? Before Master left, he had instructed him to guard the door realm well. Something really happened, he had to solve it quickly. Wu Yao shook his head. It's hard to explain in a few words. Third brother, come with me to take a look. Now that big brother and second brother were not in Peach Blossom Cove, Sanson was the one in charge. Moreover, Sanson was the most familiar with this place. Sanson nodded. Go. Let's not delay. The two of them walked straight and soon arrived in front of the door realm. Yujio was holding a wooden sword in his arms and waiting there. When he saw the two of them, he immediately went forward. Third brother, fifth brother. Sanson looked at the barrier and was shocked. The gate realm, which was originally transparent, was now flowing with vibrant colors and resplendent lights. The specks of light gathered together, forming a huge round mirror. On the edge of the mirror, complicated and exquisite patterns could be vaguely seen. They were mysterious and powerful. On the surface of the mirror, a silver light flickered. It was so dazzling that one could not open their eyes and look directly at it. When Sanson saw this scene, he was also stunned on the spot. He stared at the mirror for a long time. This mirror looked extremely heavy and sacred, but it was embedded in a thin layer of the door realm. It looked a little strange. When did this appear? This morning. Wu Yao said. After seeing it, I called Yu Jiu to guard here. I went to look for you, third brother. This matter was obviously not right. He did not dare to be negligent. Sanson took a step forward and immediately felt a strong pressure spreading out from it. It was difficult to get close. Upon closer inspection, the void near the door realm seemed to be affected by the mirror and was slightly distorted. Sanson frowned. Third brother, shouldn't we report this to Master as soon as possible? Yu Jiu asked. Sanson nodded. Of course I do. He turned back to look at the two of them with a conflicted expression. But, who should we send? Wu Yao and Yu Jiu looked at each other. The two of them had been taking turns to guard this door realm. Of course, it was more suitable for them to do this. I'll go. Wu Yao pondered for a moment and said. Speaking of which, this is the first time I've seen such a situation. I'll try my best to explain it to Master. Sanson nodded in agreement but felt a headache coming on. But if you leave, won't Yu Jiu be the only one left here? There were many strong martial artists in the Peach Blossom Cove, but their master valued this realm very much. Thus, they tacitly agreed to entrust it to the 13 sect. Presently, Sun Yi and the rest had all followed Chu Liyue to the illusory god palace, leaving only the few of them to guard the Peach Blossom Cove. It would be difficult to choose a suitable person to guard the gate realm. At this moment, a sound suddenly came from a mountain peak not far away. The three of them looked up at the same time and saw a thin and tall figure standing at the top of the mountain. The surrounding heaven and earth energy was rapidly surging towards him. That's little 13? Yu Jiu asked in surprise. Is he going to break through? That's him. Wu Yao narrowed his eyes. This child has been going out early and coming back late recently. I didn't expect him to break through now. Sanson rubbed his round palms. I remember that little 13 should have broken through to become a rank 9 warrior, right? How long has it been since he broke through? Little 13's talent is not to be underestimated. Boom. As he spoke, a majestic aura suddenly spread from little 13's body. He had officially become a rank 9 warrior. Sanson nodded in satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. I'll pick some good pills for little 13 to stabilize his realm. Yu Jiu glanced at him faintly. It's rare for third brother to be so generous. Usually, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for them to take anything from him. However, third brother was extremely good to little 13. Sanson snorted. Can you compare to little 13? This child. Whoosh. Before he could finish his sentence, Sanson suddenly realized that the surrounding heaven and earth energy had begun to surge towards little 13 at an even faster speed. The abundant energy surged like a tide, causing a huge commotion. Wu Yao suddenly realized something and his eyes lit up. Little 13 is going to break through consecutively. Now that he was a rank 9 warrior, he would be an exalted god. Yu Jiu took 2 steps forward and realized that it was true. With this momentum, he was definitely going to break through to become an exalted god. Damn, breaking through to become an exalted god from a rank 9 warrior is a qualitative leap. He didn't even prepare at all and just did it directly? Yu Jiu's face was filled with envy and resentment. I'm jealous. Back then, in order to cross the threshold of becoming an exalted god, he had spent a lot of effort and lost count of how many wooden swords he had used. Now little 13 just had to stomp his feet. Wu Yao glanced at Sanson. Third brother, little 13 is going to become an exalted god. He's not a child anymore, right? How could there be such a heaven-defying child? Sanson, I'm jealous too. Wu Yao, boom. The sound of thunder rolled out from the clouds. The three of them stood in place and waited patiently, intending to wait for little 13 to break through before doing anything else. After all, this was not something that could be passed so easily. It was better to see it with their own eyes. However, they soon realized that something was wrong. In the sky, after the sound of thunder fell, Tianlei did not gather. What's going on? Yu Jiu frowned. Since little 13 wanted to break through to become an exalted god, he must be confident enough. But why couldn't he summon a single Tianlei? Suddenly, Sanson slapped his thigh. I remember now. The two of them looked at him in unison. Sanson explained with a frown. Recently, the cultivators in Peach Blossom Cove have been unable to summon Tianlei. You two have been stationed here, so you might not know, but I've heard of a few similar situations. It's not just the exalted gods, but also those who are preparing to break through to become exalted gods. No matter what they do, they can't summon even half of Tianlei's power. It's just that I've been busy before, so I forgot about it. At first, Sanson didn't really take this matter to heart. However, judging from Little 13's current situation, it was much more serious than he had expected. None of them worked? Wu Yao and Yu Jie were shocked. They looked at each other. Then what's going on? You know, without the tempering of Tianlei's power, it's very difficult to break through. Even if they could do it, there would be some problems. Sanson scratched his head anxiously. This, clang. The sound of something shattering suddenly came from the sky. Chapter 2347. The three of them looked over and saw a silver Tianlei in the sky. It was heading straight for Little 13. Where did this Tianlei come from? Sanson was stunned and subconsciously raised its head to take a look. What the hell? This Tianlei didn't come from the sky, but flew over from an unknown place. Moreover, it appeared too suddenly. Will there be a problem? I think we should go and stop that Tianlei. Yu Jie said as he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. However, he had just taken half a step when a second Tianlei came. It was also heading for Little 13. At the same time, an inexplicably familiar aura came. Wu Yao narrowed his eyes and raised his hand to stop Yu Jie. Wait. Yu Jie was stunned and looked at him strangely. Wu Yao raised his head. Don't you feel that this movement seems like I've seen it before? Yu Jie blinked. Sanson, however, suddenly thought of something, and a great panic appeared in its small eyes. No way. That little ancestor is here? Chi. Another silver Tianlei suddenly appeared. Wu Yao said calmly. Not just one but two. Sanson turned around and ran. Wu Yao had already expected this and didn't stop him. He only raised his voice and asked, "Third brother, they're already here. Where can you run to? Don't forget that the flowers and plants in Qingshui Cliff still need you." Sanson stopped in his tracks and his face was full of pain. He wanted to run because he felt sorry for those treasures. Yu Jie saw the reaction of the two and suddenly realized something. His face was full of joy. It's the two of them? Wu Yao laughed. Who else could it be? Yu Jie said excitedly. Third brother. Then hurry up and get ready. We haven't seen each other for so long. Why don't you give them a greeting gift or something? Sanson wanted to cry but had no tears. So it's not you guys who are bleeding. While the three of them were talking, a few more silver Tianlei appeared one after another. 13 was still in a daze at first, but when the first Tianlei arrived in front of him, he immediately realized something and was pleasantly surprised. Then without hesitation he drew the Tianlei into his body and began to refine his divine body. Although Tianlei did not descend from the sky, it still contained an astonishing amount of power. 13's entire body was in intense pain, as if every inch of his flesh, blood and bones were being torn apart. However, he could only grit his teeth and swallow all of it. At the same time he tried his best to convert all of it into his own strength. Then came the second and the third. Numerous Tianlei surged forth and shone brightly, almost completely enveloping 13's figure. However, the aura on his body continued to rise. Finally, when the last ray of silver light entered his body, he suddenly opened his eyes. A shocking aura burst out from his body. At this point 13 had finally broken through and entered the high god realm. Not a demigod. It's the exalted god. Yu Jie couldn't hide her excitement. Little 13 is indeed powerful. Wu Yao's face was filled with satisfaction and admiration. As expected of Big Brother's personal disciple, such a young high god should be a rare existence in the entire Divine Ruins world, right? On the mountain top, the fluctuations around 13 gradually calmed down. He looked in the direction of the Tianlei. A joyful smile appeared on the young man's handsome face. 11th sister, 12th sister. As soon as he finished speaking, two figures quickly flew over from afar. They were two young girls who looked no more than 15 or 16 years old. They wore the same dress, but one was pink and the other was lake green. When they stood together they contrasted nicely and looked very beautiful. However, most importantly, those two young women were both very beautiful. They were extremely beautiful. They were actually a pair of twins. However, although the two of them looked exactly the same, their auras were very different. The girl in the lake green dress had a cold expression and a strong aura. The other girl seemed to be a little timid and obedient as she followed behind the girl in the lake green dress. The two of them stepped on a sword and were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of 13. 13 went forward to welcome them. The two girls showed the same smile on their faces. The difference was that one went from being cold to being gentle, and the other went from being soft to being cute. "Congratulations, 13. The girl in the lake green dress said. Her voice was as bright and clear as her appearance. 11th sister, I should be the one thanking you. If it wasn't for your help just now. 11th sister waved her hand. We're all brothers, no need to be so polite. 13 was speechless. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly and he finally said, It's been so many years, 11th sister, you haven't changed at all. 12th sister quietly tugged at 11th sister's clothes and whispered, Sister, it's brother and sister. 11th sister raised an eyebrow. What's the difference? 12th sister shrunk her head and whispered. Yes. 13 laughed dryly and then he was surprised to find, 11th sister, 12th sister, you've also become high gods? We broke through not too long ago. If not for this we wouldn't have come back so late. 11th sister explained. 13 nodded in understanding. By the way, that Tianlei just now. He still couldn't figure out how they managed to send so many bolts of heavenly lightning over. He thought that he wouldn't make it today. 11th sister's face was expressionless. Oh, that's nothing. We just broke an Emperor Divine artifact and took out the power of Tianlei from it for you. 13 was speechless. In the distance, Sanson heard this and wanted to leave. Emperor Divine artifact. It was destroyed just like that. These two little ancestors were so full of themselves now. However, at this moment 12th sister looked over. Third brother and the others seemed to be here too. Although there was some distance between them, it would be a lie to say that they couldn't see or hear. Yuju was very happy. Third brother, fifth brother, what are you waiting for? Let's go. It's been so long since we last saw them. After he finished speaking, he took a step forward, tipped his toes and headed straight over. Wu Yao glanced at Sanson and reminded him, Third brother, 11th sister doesn't like people to be late. After saying that, he also followed after her. Sanson took a deep breath and prepared himself mentally for a long time. He stretched out his hand and put on a smile before turning around to follow. Don't be afraid. Maybe these two little ancestors have grown up and won't be as ignorant as before. With that thought, Sanson finally felt more at ease. They were not slow and soon reached the top of the mountain. 11th sister. 12th sister. Yuju laughed. We haven't seen each other for so long. Did you miss 9th brother? No. I did. The two girls spoke in unison. Chapter 23:49. Aunt 12 looked at Aunt 11 helplessly. It was rare for her to be so stubborn. She repeated, Yes. My sister and I miss our master, brothers and sisters very much. Oh right, and 13. She rarely said so many words at once. Although she tried to raise her voice, it was not obvious. It still sounded soft. It was as if she had not eaten her fill. Then Yuju really did ask. Sister 12, you came without eating? Aunt 12 blushed and shrunk behind Aunt 11. After a while she replied softly, Yes. Aunt 11 said, We were in a hurry. These few words could be considered an explanation. Yujio's heart suddenly ached. How can this be? No matter how anxious you are, you can't not eat your fill. Aunt 11 shook her head. It's nothing. We heard that third brother has a lot of good food here, so we thought that it would be the same if we came here to eat. Sanson, who had just arrived, heard this and suddenly stopped in his tracks. Aunt 11 had already looked over. Third brother were hungry. The flesh on Sanson's face trembled. Under the gaze of several pairs of eyes, he took out 2 bottles of pills with difficulty and handed them over. Is this enough? Aunt 11 took it with both hands and turned her head to pass it to Aunt 12. Use it first. After that she turned around and looked at Sanson. There was no expression on her cold and indifferent face. But Sanson was too familiar with her expression. He gritted his teeth and took out 2 more bottles. Third brother, both of us are high gods now, Aunt 11 reminded him softly. Sanson's hands trembled and he took more out with tears in his eyes. 1 bottle, another bottle and another bottle. Aunt 11 did not stop him. It was not until Sanson's hands were almost unable to hold it that he could not help but ask, "Still not enough?" Aunt 11 took the things, gave some to Aunt 12 and kept some for herself. Aunt 12 opened a bottle and whispered, "Sister, these are all doctor-level pills." Aunt 11 raised her eyebrows. "Third brother, don't you have doctor-level pills?" The corner of Sanson's mouth twitched. "How much is this?" "It's enough for you to eat for a long time." It took a lot of effort to break a King Divine artifact. Aunt 11 said confidently, "If third brother really can't bear to part with the food, then it's fine. We'll just starve. Anyway, we've already gotten used to it after all these years. Here, here, here. Give it all to me." Sanson couldn't listen to them anymore. She took out a lot of pills and stuffed them into the hands of the two girls. Lady 12's lips curled into a faint smile. "Thank you, third brother." Aunt 11 glanced at Sanson. "Looks like third brother is indeed rich and imposing now." Given his personality, the fact that he could take out so many of them so easily meant that he had an astonishing amount of them. Sanson's heart sank. Exposed. He rubbed his face with heartache. He used this kind of trick every single time. He didn't even bother to switch. However, there was nothing he could do. What could she do about her sister? How could he let her starve? Yujio urged. "Hurry up and eat. Otherwise, third brother will regret it later." Sanson glared at him. Only then did Aunt 11 and Sanson respond. They opened the jade bottles in their hands and began to eat the pills. Aunt 12 was thin-skinned and was more refined. She poured out the pills and ate them one by one slowly. Aunt 11 directly opened the cork and gulped down the pills. Sanson looked away and clutched his chest with heartache. In the 13 guards, other than little 13, these two were the youngest. Because they were both girls and twins, the brothers and sisters had doted on them a lot back then. They were even more doted on than little 13. Who knew that these two girls were not ordinary people at all? On the surface, the two girls looked beautiful and slender, gentle and cute. However, in reality, their appetite was more than the rest of the 13 guards. It was more than the rest of the 11 people combined. Fortunately, Tu Liwei was still the empress at that time and could still afford to feed them. But slowly the two girls grew up. Normal meals were no longer enough for them. No matter how much they ate, they still got hungry easily and were often weak and powerless. Later, Tsun-Yi started to let them eat pills. The older they were, the more pills they ate and the higher the level of pills they ate. When other people ate different pills, they would have different effects on their bodies. However, it was different for the two of them. All kinds of pills had only one function when it came to them: to replenish their energy. If they could eat their fill, they would have strength. That was why Yujio asked them that the moment they met. It was because they had been hungry too often in the past. Now they had reached the point where they ate pills of doctors and even grand doctors. Seeing the two girls finish several bottles of pills just like that, Wu Yao and Yujio only felt heartache. Look at how hungry the children are. Sanson glanced over and took a deep breath. He felt heartache for the two of them, but he also felt heartache for the pills. It was not until they finished 3/4 of the pills in their hands that the two of them finally stopped. Aunt 11 put away the rest. She was finally satisfied. Even her usually cold expression warmed up a little. "Thank you, third brother." Aunt 12 also whispered, "Thank you, third brother." She even burped halfway through her sentence. Her face instantly turned even redder. Seeing this scene, Sanson could not care less about the pills. After all, he had watched them grow up. How could he not be willing to part with those things? "Are you done eating?" Aunt 12 nodded with a red face. Aunt 11 was much more straightforward. "If it was like this just now, I could have taken out a venerable one divine artifact's power of Tianlei and given it to 13. It's a pity." The corners of Sanson's eyes twitched. Even Yujio could not help but touch her nose. "This isn't very good, right? A venerable one divine artifact is quite rare. How inappropriate would it be to destroy it just like that?" Aunt 11 thought about it and felt that it made sense. She looked at 13 again. "Then you can use it the next time you break through to venerable one. It's the same." 13 did not expect to be arranged as soon as he broke through to venerable one. He was speechless. After struggling for a while, he said, "This? Maybe by then, everyone will be able to summon Tianlei normally." The main reason was that the current situation was too strange. Crack. A crisp sound suddenly rang out. Everyone present was shocked. When they looked over, they found that 12th Nyong was holding a sword that had already broken into 2 pieces. It was the sword that the two of them used when they flew over just now. It was also an Emperor Divine artifact. Aunt 12 obviously did not expect the situation to turn out like this. She stared blankly at the broken sword in her hand, then looked up at the others with a guilty expression. I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to put it away. Everyone was speechless. Aunt 11 was already used to this. She took the broken sword and rolled it into a ball. Then she pulled out a few silver tianlei from it and absorbed them into her body. Don't waste it. Sister, remember to eat until you're full next time. Sister 12 nodded obediently. I know. Chapter 2350. When she ate too much, she could not control the strength in her hands. She had made this mistake before, so she was usually very careful. However, she had been hungry for too long this time and could not hold it in. Although Aunt 11 had the same physique as her, as the elder sister, she had better self-control. Just as she was about to throw away the thing in her hand, Aunt 11 noticed that the others were looking at her strangely. She paused. This thing can't be thrown away? She glanced down at it. But this is already a pile of scrap metal. There was nothing to be reluctant about, right? Yujio swallowed hard. Sister 11, it was an Emperor Divine artifact just a few minutes ago. It was destroyed by you in the blink of an eye. Don't you feel sad at all? Aunt 11 looked at him. And Aunt 12 whispered in agreement. Brother 9, this thing really can't be used anymore. What was the point of keeping it? Yujio's eyes twitched. Of course he knew that this thing could not be used anymore. Was this the key to the problem? Wu Yao coughed. They're right. Even if it was an Emperor Divine artifact before, now that it can't be used, it's no different from trash. It's good to throw it away. The rest of the people fell silent. Originally they wanted to ask how the two girls had survived these few years, but now it seemed that there was no need to ask. Even if they really wanted to ask, they should ask the people who met them how they survived. Where's Master? Aunt 11 looked left and right. We've been here for so long, but I don't seem to have sensed Master's aura. Seeing that the two of them seemed to be very uninformed, Wu Yao briefly recounted what had happened before to them. After listening, Aunt 11 was still calm, but Aunt 12 had already widened her eyes and looked at the silver bridge in the sky. Then, if that's the case, Master and the others are there now? Wu Yao nodded. That's right. Also, there's some trouble in the gate realm. We were thinking of reporting to Master. Aunt 11 followed his line of sight. Is this gate realm very important? Wu Yao nodded. That's why we're still discussing who should stay here to guard it with Yujio. That's easy. As Aunt 11 spoke, she flipped her hand and took out something. Dong. The heavy object fell to the ground with a dull thud. Sanson and the others looked carefully and were immediately shocked. What appeared in front of them was an 8-foot-tall bronze man covered in dark gold. This is a puppet? Sanson's eyes lit up. She stepped forward and pinched the puppet's arm. This is made of the best heavy gold copper. Just a palm-sized piece would be a priceless treasure in the outside world. As for this puppet, it was made entirely out of this material. He knocked. You're still honest. This puppet's battle prowess is comparable to that of a top god. Leave it here and help guard the gate realm. Aunt 11 said. Wu Yao was instantly tempted. This was indeed a good idea. Now that 13 had also become a high god, he was thinking of having 13 and Yujio work together to guard the door realm. The only drawback was that 13's combat power was not on par with Yujio's for the time being. But with this puppet things were different. This thing will indeed be of great help to us. However, why do you have such a treasure in your hands? Wu Yao asked curiously. Aunt 11 said, Big Brother gave it to us. Everyone! Exclamation point. Seeing the shocked expressions on their faces, 12th Mother said softly, Back then Big Brother was worried that the two of us would be bullied outside, so he gave this to us. Third brother, don't you have it? She thought everyone had it. Aunt 11 shook her head. Do you even need to ask? If they had this thing, they would not have been worried about the gate realm just now. Yujio looked down at the wooden sword in her hand and was full of resentment. We all follow the same Big Brother. Why is the difference so big? Wu Yao said, Be content. Your wooden sword was personally carved by Big Brother. I have nothing. Yujio gritted her teeth. You're just a fighter. What do you want? Big Brother's fist? Sanson clutched his chest in pain. Stop talking. All these years, not only did he not take anything from Big Brother, but he had also given him a lot of things. He worked hard for years to earn that little bit of money, but none of it went into his private account. 13 silently took half a step back. Speaking of which, he had learned the most from Big Brother. Naturally, he had no right to interrupt. Wu Yao forced himself to calm down. Then it's settled. As for the two of you, we'll go to the illusory god palace too. Aunt 11 said. Wu Yao choked. Are you sure? Yes. Sanson suddenly realized something and immediately nodded. The illusory god palace is great. There are all kinds of treasures there. Aunt 11 nodded. Yes, that's what we think too. I heard that there's a mountain of herbs there. There should be a lot of pills there. Also, there seem to be a lot of blacksmiths there. Logically speaking, there should be a lot of divine artifacts. Isn't that great? When Wu Yao heard this, he immediately felt that it made sense. Okay, then let's go together. Illusory God Palace, Treasure Pavilion. Zhao sent Chu Luiyue into the room and left by himself. After he closed the door, he turned around and frowned. Madame said, she wanted to copy all the remaining Xian formations of the mythical flame diagram? Then wouldn't she be able to complete the star path directly? Chapter 2351. He held his breath and looked back again. Even though he couldn't see anything through the door, the waves in his heart couldn't calm down for a long time. It wasn't that he hadn't seen the world, but this was too ridiculous. The mythical flame diagram had been stored in the treasure pavilion for a long time. Some people came to buy it while others were chosen to help copy it. But most of these people were busy with the first volume. As for the second volume, many people couldn't even understand it, let alone the rest. Ming Shu had seen many Xian masters who were determined by their talent, but so far no one had comprehended the entire mythical flame diagram. Of course, Jin Yunlai wasn't one of them, because he had indeed completed the Star Road on his own. As for the others, Qing shook his head, his eyes still filled with disbelief. Looking at Madame's calm and confident look, it seemed like victory was in her hands. He thought about it carefully. In his impression, she did not show the slightest bit of embarrassment because of the mythical flame diagram. The previous few times after she came, she would exchange a few simple greetings before going directly to the second floor and entering the room to copy the Xian formations. She didn't take long. He had seen the replicated ones and they were all perfect. Looking at her, she did seem to be at ease. If she could really copy all the Xian formations this time, then, after leaving this door, she could directly cross the Star Road and enter the illusory God Palace. If this were to happen, she would be the first person to successfully complete the Star Road after Jin Yunlai. Qing was a little excited. Madame's talent and strength seemed to be more amazing than he had expected. He rubbed his hands, suppressed the emotions in his heart and left. In the room, Chu Luiyue sat quietly by the window. There were 2 books in front of her. It was the mythical flame diagram. The first volume was closed at the side, and the second volume was opened beside her hand. She glanced at it and began to copy without hesitation. Her movements were smooth and without any hesitation. These Xian formations had already been deeply engraved in her mind. As long as she used her memory, she could easily draw them. She was incomparably clear about every single pattern and every single direction. Previously, due to various reasons, she had not displayed her full strength. Every time he came, he would restrain himself. He would only copy a portion of it and stall for time before leaving. As a matter of fact, she'd taken advantage of this period of time to engrave every single diagram in her heart and comprehend them thoroughly. Now she didn't want to drag it out any longer. She had to enter the illusory shrine as soon as possible. Time passed by slowly. Under Chu Luiyue's hands, one profound formation after another was replicated. The further he progressed, the more time he spent and the more energy and patience he had to expend. However, Chu Luiyue's expression remained calm from beginning to end. He was neither anxious nor impatient and proceeded in an orderly manner. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Mingshu came to Chu Luiyue again. He was curious and worried. I wonder how Madame is doing inside. The profound formation on the mythical flame diagram was extremely complicated, and many people would not be able to decipher even one of them in their entire lives. However, she wanted to comprehend all of it and replicate it. This was a huge project that required a lot of time and energy. It was very quiet inside. During this period of time, Mingshu would actually come to take a look every day and wait outside the door. Other than the sound of books being flipped, he could hardly hear any other sounds. After waiting for a while, seeing that Chu Luiyue still did not plan to come out today, he could only shake his head and leave. Fengming Mountain. Tuanzi sat cross-legged and flames were burning around her silently. The air was scorching hot. From afar, the entire top of Fengming Mountain seemed to be surrounded by scarlet gold flames. When Yu Qian arrived, this was the scene he saw. A hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. As expected of the purest bloodline, whether it was Yi Zhao or Yi Gong, none of them could compare to it. At this rate of cultivation, Tuanzi should be able to open the 8th meridian in no time. Yu Qian was in a good mood. Although he had made quite a few concessions in order to make Dumpling break the contract with Chu Luiyue and stay in Fengming Mountain to cultivate. But now it seemed that everything was worth it. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the side. Yu Qian frowned and looked in the direction of the sound. There seemed to be a shadow flashing past. His expression turned stern. Who is it? Fengming Mountain was heavily guarded. Other than him and Dumpling, only Chu Luiyue could enter and leave freely. However, she also relied on his token to come, so he knew every time. However, the black shadow that flashed by just now had clearly barged in quietly. He moved and quickly chased in that direction. At this moment, Dumpling suddenly opened her eyes. She stood up, frowned, and shouted, "What are you doing?" Yu Qian stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Dumpling. "You don't have to worry about it. Just cultivate in peace." Dumpling glared. "But you're disturbing my cultivation." Yu Qian paused. "I told you not to come over. Leave immediately." Dumpling put her hands on her waist. "But there was something just now. What was it? Why didn't I see it?" Dumpling glared at him fiercely. "Are you leaving or not?" Yu Qian wanted to say something but hesitated. He really didn't want to disturb Dumpling, so he could only give in. "I'll leave. You continue." After he finished speaking, he moved and headed out of Fengming Mountain. Only when she was sure that he had left did Dumpling let out a soft snort. Still not coming out? Digression, as he wrote, he realized that he had inexplicably lost 2,000 words. He went to the system to look for it for a long time before he could find it. Chapter 2352. The surroundings were quiet and no one appeared. Dumpling crossed her two small arms. "I've already helped you so much and you don't even want to thank me?" A moment later, a scarlet fruit was thrown over. Dumpling grabbed the fruit. Cinnabar fruit? A bright light flashed in her eyes. This was her favorite fruit, one of them. Ever since she started cultivating in Fengming Mountain, she hadn't eaten anything delicious for a long time. She happily held the cinnabar fruit and was about to put it into her mouth. But when it reached her mouth, she held it back and pouted as she looked in the direction where the fruit was thrown. "Don't think that a single cinnabar fruit can buy me off." Humph. Another cinnabar fruit was sent over. Dumpling raised her hand to catch it and put the fruit into her bosom. "Two won't do. Today you have to come out and let me see." As she spoke, she lifted her foot and walked forward. Swish. A slight sound of something tearing through the air rang out. Then Tuanzi saw a blurry shadow flashing in front of her eyes. She gritted her teeth, tipped her toes and immediately flew forward. "Let's see where you're going this time." She couldn't catch up the previous few times, but this time she had to see it clearly no matter what. That thing ran very quickly and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. Dumpling stopped and looked down at the cinnabar fruit in her hand. A rich fruity fragrance was emitted from it, causing people to drool. She licked her lips and resisted the urge to eat it. "Want to run?" "It's not that easy." The smell of this cinnabar fruit could stay on a person's body for several days. It didn't matter if she couldn't see it. Following this smell, she could still find him. Dumpling wrinkled her nose, then followed the faint fragrance in the air and ran forward. A quarter of an hour later, Dumpling stopped in front of the barrier between Fengming Mountain and the illusory god palace. She frowned. Could it be inside? That was where the fragrance had disappeared. She looked up and down, left and right. This barrier descended from the sky, completely isolating them from the outside world. If he wanted to leave this place, the only way was to go through the barrier. No wonder. Dumpling suddenly understood. Previously she couldn't find him at all. So he had actually run back to the illusory god palace? To think that she had been searching Fengming Mountain recently. She had almost dug 3 feet into the ground, but she still couldn't find him. In the end, he was looking in the wrong direction. She hesitantly glanced at the barrier in front of her. "How do I get there?" Oh right. Suddenly her eyes lit up. She held the 2 cinnabar fruits in her left hand and gently waved her right hand, summoning the ancestor golden feather. If I remember correctly, this thing can directly pass through the barrier. Dumpling thought and waved her hand gently. Buzz, a crack quickly appeared on the barrier. Success. Dumpling was pleasantly surprised. He quickly entered. Abundant heaven and earth energy instantly surged in from all directions. Dumpling took a deep breath and felt cool all over. Feng Ming Mountain was good, but it was a little hot. Therefore, when he suddenly came out from the inside, he was still not used to it. Dumpling turned around to take a look. The crack had already quietly closed. The surroundings were also quiet, as if no one had noticed her arrival. Dumpling blinked. This barrier seemed to be very easy to pass through. She put away the ancestor golden feather and sure enough she caught the other party's remaining aura in the air. Over there. Dumpling confirmed the direction and quickly rushed over. Puff. A sound rang out in the quiet courtyard. Something suddenly drilled into the pile of fallen leaves, raising countless flying leaves. After a moment, an indifferent and quiet voice came from the room. You sneaked to Feng Ming Mountain again? The pile of fallen leaves remained motionless. Have you forgotten what I warned you before? There was a hint of coldness in that voice. The courtyard was deathly silent. At this moment, a series of knocks came from outside. Knock knock. Is anyone there? A crisp and soft voice came from outside. The conversation in the room abruptly stopped. Outside the door, Dumpling's face revealed a smug and proud smile. Hee, this is your home, right? I've already found you here, are you still not willing to come out? She was very sure that the other party was definitely here, because that was where the smell had disappeared. Originally she wanted to go in directly, but there was a layer of barrier outside the courtyard. She thought about it and felt that it was not appropriate to force her way in, so she obediently chose to knock on the door. Since he had already chased her here, there was no reason to hide, right? After waiting for a while, it was still quiet inside. There was no response. Dumpling knocked on the door again. Knock knock knock. I'm not a bad person, why aren't you coming out? Still no one answered. Dumpling waited for a while longer, a little angry, and pouted. If you don't come out, I'll go in myself. After saying that, she placed her hands on the door and moved her chubby little face closer, wanting to peek through the crack in the door. Unfortunately, although this courtyard was not big, the quality of the courtyard door was excellent. She widened her grape-like eyes and spun them around, but she still couldn't see anything. How can this be? Dumpling muttered softly. She had done him a huge favor. Was she going to leave 2 cinnabar fruits behind just like that? Why are you here? The voice of a woman filled with astonishment came from behind. Dumpling turned her head to look. The person who came was Xu Jing. Dumpling pursed her lips and ignored her. She pressed her face against the door again and secretly exerted force with both hands. Perhaps she could really open the door and go in to take a look. However, her behavior was extremely arrogant and presumptuous in Xu Jing's eyes. What are you doing? Xu Jing frowned. This dumpling not only left Feng Ming Mountain, but also ran to the first divine envoy's place to behave atrociously? What was she doing, trying to force her way in? Dumpling pretended that she did not hear her. Xu Jing was infuriated. She had come to find the first divine envoy this time to solve the problem of the barrier in Herb Mountain. After the abnormal situation that day, she did not care much and hurried back to the palace of the illusory god. She wanted to ask for help, but she was scolded and ridiculed by the second divine envoy. Helpless, she could only go back and think of a solution herself. In fact, she was also holding back her anger in her heart. After so many years, she still had not been able to solve the problem of the barrier. She was also anxious. That day when she had been slapped by Little 8, she was already angry enough. Now the second divine envoy's words had completely enraged her. She simply chose to go into seclusion and think of a solution no matter what. However, how could this problem be solved so easily? She had a headache thinking about it day and night, but it still did not work. Helpless, she could only hold on to her last hope and ask the first divine envoy for help. However, she bumped into Dumpling as soon as she arrived. She stepped forward and pulled Dumpling. This is not a place where you can come. Chapter 2353. However, before he could touch Tuanzi, he suddenly felt an invisible pressure coming at him. Xu Jing was shocked and quickly dodged. However, she was still forced to take a few steps back and almost fell to the ground. She hurriedly steadied herself and looked up in bewilderment. Was this the barrier of the first divine envoy? However, Dumpling was clearly standing in front of her, so why wasn't she attacked at all? Dumpling looked back at her again. Her beautiful big eyes blinked a few times and she giggled. It seems that the people inside don't like you very much. Xu Jing was so angry that she almost choked. What nonsense are you talking about? How am I talking nonsense? Dumpling stretched out her hand and gestured. I haven't entered the courtyard yet, but you can't even get close to the door. This was a stark difference between them. Anyone would be able to see that. Xu Jing was angry and her face turned red and white. Actually, she wasn't the one who was strange, but Dumpling. Previously, when she and the 7th Divine Envoy came here, they also couldn't get close to the door. However, when she saw Dumpling leaning on the door and looking inside, she forgot for a moment. Now that she thought about it, it was obvious that Dumpling was too close. What was the first Divine Envoy thinking? Could it be because of Dumpling's identity? But shouldn't she be at Fengming Mountain now? Thinking of this, Xu Jing's expression changed. How did you get past that barrier? Dumpling glanced at her and muttered softly, It's none of your business. As she spoke, she knocked on the door again. If you don't come out, I'm really going to kick the door down. Xu Jing trembled with fear as she listened. Who was she talking to? The first Divine Envoy? Impossible. However, there was no one else in this courtyard other than the first Divine Envoy. At this moment, another person arrived. Dumpling, what are you doing? His voice was low and carried a hint of displeasure. When Xu Jing saw him, she quickly bowed. Greetings, second Divine Envoy. Yu Qian's eyes swept over her, but he didn't linger on her for long. He only looked at Dumpling. Not long after he left Fengming Mountain, he sensed that Dumpling had also come out. He was shocked and immediately set out to search everywhere. In the end, he found this place. Dumpling turned around and looked at Yu Qian with hostility. It's none of your business. His tone was very aggressive. Xu Jing frowned and sneered in his heart. The second Divine Envoy usually looked gentle, but he wasn't easy to get along with. What he hated the most was when someone contradicted him. Dumpling had spoken so rudely, so she had to be taught a lesson. However, what shocked her was that Yu Qian didn't seem to be angry. He stared at Dumpling for a moment and said, Didn't we agree before that you would cultivate well in Fengming Mountain? What are you doing now? Dumpling snorted. Fengming Mountain is so boring, can't I come out for a walk? Yu Qian narrowed his eyes. You came out on your own? Dumpling's heart skipped a beat. She raised her small face. Yes. I opened the barrier myself with the ancestor's golden feather. What's wrong? Yu Qian paused. It's not impossible for you to come to the palace of the illusory god. The second Divine Envoy? Xu Jing was shocked. What kind of place was this? How could Dumpling come and go as she pleased? Looking at her arrogant and despotic appearance, who knew what she would do in the future? Yu Qian gave Xu Jing a warning look. It was not her place to intervene in this kind of matter. Xu Jing felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly lowered his head and swallowed the rest of his words. However, his hands were tightly clenched in his sleeves and his knuckles turned white. She was the 8th Divine Envoy and should be high and mighty. But now, anyone could ride on her head and behave atrociously. Yu Qian looked at Dumpling. However, there are some places you can go and some places you can't. This is the residence of the first Divine Envoy. You are not allowed to disturb her in the future. His expression remained the same, but there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Dumpling pursed her lips. He was extremely smart. She knew when to make a fuss and when not to. Just like now, Yu Qian was definitely not joking. She gritted her teeth and snorted softly. If you don't want to come, then don't. There are plenty of places to play here anyway. After saying that, she walked away with her little legs. Halfway through, she suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at Yu Qian. Who in the palace of the illusory god has a magical beast? Yu Qian raised his eyebrows. Among the divine envoys, only I am responsible for guarding the mythological beast. Dumpling pursed her lips and turned to leave. Yu Qian followed her. If you are really bored, I can show you around. But he would never allow Tuanzi to run around here by herself. Dumpling was very tired of him. She wished she could never see his annoying face again. But she also knew that if she really wanted to see what the palace of the illusory god was like, she really had to let him follow her. Crunch. She picked up the cinnabar fruit in her arms and took a fierce bite. Seeing that Yu Qian really left with dumpling, Xu Jing gritted her teeth in hatred. What the hell? She was just a member of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. She was really arrogant. She didn't even put her, the 8th divine envoy, in her eyes. But the 2nd divine envoy thought highly of her. Needless to say, as long as Dumpling didn't make any big mistakes, she would be able to do whatever she wanted here for a long time. Xu Jing was very angry, but she also knew that there was nothing she could do. Dumpling's existence was too important to the palace of the illusory god. Otherwise, the 2nd divine envoy wouldn't spoil her so much. She turned her head to look at the closed door. From beginning to end, the 1st divine envoy didn't say a word. This was undoubtedly a tacit approval of the 2nd divine envoy's actions. No matter how much she said, it was useless. After calming down the emotions in her heart, she finally remembered her purpose for coming here. 1st divine envoy, the barrier at the Herb Mountain is starting to have problems again. That's your business. An indifferent and cold voice came from within. I've given you so much time to deal with it. If you still can't solve it, then no one can help you. Xu Jing's face turned pale. But that barrier was... Her voice suddenly stopped. She didn't dare to say what she was going to say next. No one dared to mention what happened back then. It was best to leave it as a blur in the dust of time. That was a taboo in the palace of the illusory god. She clearly knew this. After hesitating for a long time, seeing that the 1st divine envoy really didn't intend to do anything, she finally gave up and bowed to leave. Xu Jing will take her leave. After leaving, Xu Jing originally wanted to go back to her residence. But halfway there, the fire in her heart burned more and more fiercely. The 1st divine envoy, the 2nd divine envoy, and the others were all watching with folded arms. Were they really planning to make things difficult for her? Recently, unlucky things had happened one after another, and it almost made her collapse. She couldn't just let everyone step on her head. Thinking of this, she turned around and walked out of the palace of the illusory god. The matter of the barrier at the Herb Mountain couldn't be solved in a short time. She might as well go and get back at little Hachi first. Chapter 2354. She couldn't afford to offend the 2 divine envoys, but she could still teach a lowly person without a bloodline totem a lesson. However, before she reached the door, she suddenly noticed something and stopped in her tracks. Then the void in front of her began to shake. A tall and slender figure slowly appeared. She was stunned at first, but then she recognized the person and a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. Yen, where are you going? A cold voice sounded. Xu Jing was stunned and said subconsciously, I'm going out. You're not going to the Herb Mountain. The other party's tone was very certain. Xu Jing felt that something was wrong. Her eyes flashed and she said, if I'm not going to the Herb Mountain, where else can I go? The appearance and figure of the man opposite her were hidden behind the fluctuating void, and she couldn't see him clearly. However, Xu Jing seemed to be able to feel a pair of sharp and cold eyes staring at her. Her whole body tensed up. After a while she heard the other party say, that's good. Xu Jing frowned. What do you mean? I mean, during this period of time, you'd better not go anywhere except the illusory god palace and the Herb Mountain, and don't cause any trouble. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat. Why did this sound so wrong? What did he mean by don't cause any trouble? He made it sound like she had been causing trouble all this time? Xu Jing felt a little uncomfortable, but she still forced a smile. I understand. With that, the man turned around and was about to leave. Wait. Xu Jing hurriedly stopped him. The man half turned around. Is there anything else? Xu Jing pursed her lips and asked nervously, nothing. It's just that I haven't seen you for a long time and I wanted to ask, how have you been? After asking this, Xu Jing's face was faintly hot. This question seemed a little abrupt. I've been very well. Unexpectedly, that person actually gave a reply. Xu Jing was stunned. In the past he would never say anything more, but this time, then... Xu Jing was about to continue speaking, but the void vibrated and the man had already left. Looking at the empty void in front of her, Xu Jing felt a little disappointed for a moment. But when she remembered that he had actually answered her question, her heart seemed to overflow with joy. After thinking for a while, Xu Jing gradually calmed the churning thoughts in her heart and began to think about what he had said before. Don't cause any more trouble and can only stay in the Herb Mountain and the illusory God Palace? Did he suddenly come here today to tell her this? Could it be to warn her not to act rash action? Xu Jing. On the one hand, she wanted to find little 8 for revenge and get back the slap she gave him that day. On the other hand, the sudden arrival of this person also confused her. After thinking about it for a while, she finally put away her thoughts and decided to put the matter of little 8 aside. That person must have a deep meaning for suddenly saying all this. No matter how he thought about it, it was better to wait and see how things turned out. The courtyard was silent. Suddenly, an explosion came from one of the rooms. Bang! The sound shocked Hua Shuang so much that she pushed the door open and ran out. What's wrong? What are you doing? Smelling the burnt smell, he shouted at once. Little Hachi, did you do something again? Hearing Hua Shuang's voice, little Hachi, who had just run out of the house, felt wronged. Second brother. I've been busy in my room. Which eye of yours saw me do something? She held the door and stepped on her shoes carelessly. Her hands were stained with red. Little Hachi was also very angry. She was painting her nails when there was a sudden explosion. She was so shocked that her hands trembled. The bottle of flower dew that she had painstakingly prepared spilled just like that. Who could she reason with? Hua Shuang covered her face. If it's not you, then who is it? It's me. A door at the side suddenly opened and thick black smoke floated out. A wretched figure ran out while coughing. Little Hachi's beautiful eyes were overflowing with killing intent. Jian Feng. Compensate me for the flower dew. Jian Fengqi finally came to the yard with much difficulty and sat down on the stone bench before he could catch his breath. Wait for me to recover. Hua Shuang glanced at him. Jian Fengqi, are you refining pills or setting a fire? The house is about to be set on fire. Jian Fengqi's face was streaked with black and gray. His usual suave and handsome appearance was completely gone. Cough. I was in a hurry when I was refining pills. I was about to succeed. Almost, just a little bit. Next time it will definitely succeed. Next time. Little Hachi gritted her teeth in anger. When Yanqing returned, he saw this scene. He quickly glanced around and understood what had happened. When his gaze fell on little Hachi, he frowned slightly. Little Hachi was worried that she couldn't make a move in her current state, but when she saw Yanqing, she immediately perked up. Brother Yanqing, hurry up and drag Jian Fengqi out. You're not allowed to come back until you successfully refine pills at the level of a senior doctor. Jian Fengqi knew something was wrong and immediately turned to Yanqing. Brother Yanqing, don't listen to her. Yanqing stopped in his tracks. Little Hachi widened her eyes. Jian Fengqi, you're shameless. Jian Fengqi said proudly, it's just calling me brother, I know how to do it too. Bah. Little Hachi bent down angrily to pick up the shoe and threw it at him. Although Jian Fengqi failed to refine pills, he still had the ability to react. He immediately lay back and dodged the shoe. Then the shoe flew toward Yanqing. Smack. A sound was heard. Yanqing raised his hand and caught the shoe expressionlessly. The courtyard fell into a dead silence. Chapter 2355. Little Hachi was born enchanting and beautiful. She had always been very picky about what she ate and wore. She always used the best. Even her shoes were very exquisite and gorgeous. There were patterns drawn by her on them, and many colorful jade beads and jade chips were strung together. Under the sunlight, the shoes sparkled. When they swayed with the wind, they made a series of rustling sounds. However, at this moment the shoes fell on an iceberg. Hua Shuang silently looked away. The scene was too beautiful. He didn't dare to look at it. Ahem, I remember that I still have something to do. You guys go ahead. As he spoke, he swiftly retreated back into the house and closed the door with a ping sound. Jian Fengqi stiffly dragged his body back. I'll go back and clean the room. You guys go ahead. As soon as he took a step, a cold wind hit him. Whoosh. A bright and sharp longsword was already in front of him. He slowly turned his head and looked at Yanqing. Brother Yanqing, I can help you if you don't want your tongue. Yanqing opened his mouth. His voice was so cold that it seemed to be mixed with ice. Jian Fengqi immediately covered his mouth. I promise I won't do it again. Yan Qing put away his sword. Jian Fengqi let out a long sigh of relief. Almost. That sword was going to cut off his handsome head. Although he had always been causing trouble at the 13th Yu, Yan Qing was one of Rongxiu's people. He didn't dare to offend him, because this person could really bear to do it. Jian Fengqi's strong desire to live forced him to go against the wind and go back against the thick smoke. Compared to being cut by Yan Qing, he would rather be choked to death. His figure quickly disappeared into the cloud of black smoke, and only a few coughs could be vaguely heard. Finally, only Yan Qing and little Hachi were left in the yard. Meeting Yan Qing's gaze, little Hachi felt a little embarrassed. She hid her bare foot behind her and coughed. Lord Yan Qing, can you return my shoes to me? If they were ordinary shoes, she would just throw them away. But she really liked this pair of shoes. He had spent so much effort on this treasure, how could he just throw it away like that? Yan Qing walked over. Little Hachi immediately became nervous. Was Yan Qing planning to fight? Who wouldn't be angry if their shoes were thrown at them like that? But she didn't do it on purpose. It shouldn't be a problem if she talked to him nicely, right? While little Hachi was thinking about this, Yan Qing had already arrived at the door. There was a clear aura on his body and one of his hands was holding a sword. On the other hand, the gorgeous and exquisite shoes in his other hand seemed very out of place. Little Hachi unconsciously tightened her hand on the door. She carefully looked at Yan Qing, trying to find something from his face. Unfortunately, a certain someone's face was still as cold as ice, without the slightest bit of expression. It was really hard to guess. Then Yan Qing handed the shoes over. Little Hachi didn't take them. She stretched out her hand pitifully. There's something on my hand. I can't touch the shoes or they'll get dirty easily. Yan Qing lowered his eyes and glanced at her slender and soft hand. Her white and jade-like fingers were indeed messily stained with a bit of red at this time. He paused, bent down and squatted down. Yan Qing. Little Hachi was puzzled. Suddenly she heard him say in a low voice, "Give me your foot." Little Hachi was stunned and stretched out her bare foot subconsciously. Immediately after, a scorching hot palm grabbed her ankle. Little Hachi's first reaction was to withdraw, but Yan Qing's hand was so strong that she couldn't break free. She twisted twice but it didn't work. "Don't move," Yan Qing said. Little Hachi didn't dare to move at all. She looked down. Yan Qing was squatting in front of her, helping her put on her shoes. She blinked. For some reason there seemed to be a flame burning on her face. Her shoes were easy to put on. Yan Qing quickly helped her put them on and then stood up. The two of them were standing very close to each other. When he suddenly stood up, little Hachi suddenly felt as if there was an inexplicable sense of oppression enveloping her. He took half a step back. Yan Qing pursed his thin lips slightly. "Sorry to offend you." Little Hachi hurriedly waved her hand. No, I should thank you." Yan Qing nodded slightly. His face was as cold as ever. Without saying anything more, he turned and left. Little Hachi looked at his back and closed the door. She turned around and leaned against the door. She covered her chest and took a deep breath. On the other side, Yan Qing went around the porch and suddenly stopped at the corner. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Treasure Pavilion, 2nd floor. Light flowed in front of Chu Liyue. Her eyes were fixed on the painting as she concentrated on completing the final stroke. Buzz, she had finally replicated the last Xian formation on the mythical flame diagram. Looking at the perfect Xian formation in front of her, her lips curled into a satisfied smile. It's finally over. She had been staying here all this time without sleeping or resting. Finally she had completed it all. She closed her eyes and rested for a while. She put the mythical flame diagram and the 2 replicated books back into the box before getting up. She opened the door and saw you waiting outside. "Madam, you're finally out." Mingshu was so excited that tears filled his eyes. God knew how hard he had been waiting. At first he only came to take a look occasionally. But as time passed he became more and more worried about the situation inside. He simply chose to wait here all the time. Fortunately she was finally here. Looking at Yu's happy and excited face, Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh and handed the box over. "I've already said that Lord Ming doesn't have to wait here. I'll naturally come out after I've replicated everything." Yu hurriedly took the box. When he heard Chu Liyue's words, he suddenly came back to his senses and looked shocked. "You've really..." Chu Liyue smiled. "Lord Yu checked it personally. Ming Shu swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty and opened the box with trembling hands. It wasn't that he didn't trust Chu Liyue, but this matter was just too unbelievable. Ming Shu took out the 2 books that Chu Liyue had replicated and looked at them carefully. Every time he turned a page, the shock in his heart increased. In the end, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. All of them. She had actually replicated them all. How long had it taken? Chu Liyue chuckled and asked. Lord Yu, if there's no problem, I'll take my leave first. Yu hurriedly stepped aside and said, Madam, you should go back and rest after expending so much energy. Chu Liyue's lips curved up slightly as she shook her head. Lord Yu, you've misunderstood. I don't intend to go back and rest. Then I'm going to the star path. These few simple words caused Yu's heart to tremble. You're going to the star path and enter the palace of the illusory god? Chu Liyue smiled and nodded. Yes. She had waited for too long before. Now she didn't want to wait any longer. Chapter 2356. Ming Shu was shocked and didn't know what to say. After a while he stammered, But you've just finished these and need to rest. Even if she wanted to go to the Star Road, it would be better to rest first, right? Chu Liyue's smile deepened. That's not necessary. It's just right to go now. On one hand, she had just copied all the Xian formations and mastered them. She was in her best state. On the other hand, she didn't know why, but she didn't feel tired after looking at the last Xian formation. Instead, she felt more energetic. At first, she didn't want to go directly, but now it seemed that the situation was progressing more smoothly than expected. Then it wasn't a bad idea to strike while the iron was hot. Seeing that Chu Liyue had made up her mind, Ming Shu couldn't persuade her anymore. Wait a moment, I'll go with you. As he spoke, he hurriedly returned the box to the room and followed her out. Chu Liyue was a little surprised. Lord Ming Shu, you don't have to go through so much trouble. Ming Shu explained. Madam, since you can copy all the Xian formations here, then you should be able to finish the Star Road this time. You have to know that no one has done it since the 7th Divine Envoy. Of course, he wanted to witness it with his own eyes. Moreover, this was Madam. Chu Liyue thought about it and agreed. Not only Ming Shu but everyone in the illusory god palace would probably come after hearing the news, as long as she could finish the Star Road. She nodded. Lord Ming Shu, please. When Chu Liyue and Ming Shu arrived at the Star Road, there weren't many people here. It was very deserted. Ming Shu explained, since Mu Yafeng was found to have cheated, everyone has been more cautious. Chu Liyue nodded. She came to the place where she stopped last time and looked forward. The Star Road was long and flickering. The remaining Xian formations were the most complicated ones in the entire Star Road. But to her, it was something that had been deeply engraved in her mind. She held her breath and raised her finger gently. In the next moment, several streams of light flew out from her fingertips and intertwined in the air. So fast. Ming Shu was shocked. This was a great Grandmaster Xian formation. Yet she was able to execute it so easily and smoothly. No wonder she could complete the entire mythical flame diagram in such a short period of time. She should have already memorized every single Xian formation on it, right? Soon, a stream of light flew up and suddenly bloomed above her head. Bang! The sound instantly spread far and wide. Without any hesitation, Chu Liyue continued to move forward and started to set up the second Xian formation. At the same time, many people in the illusory god palace noticed the commotion. Is someone walking on the star path? Who is it? Why now of all times? Great Grandmaster Xian formation. Bang! Many people had yet to react when they saw the second Xian formation blossoming in midair. This time, everyone became excited. This speed is even faster than Mu Yafeng's. Don't mention Mu Yafeng. He cheated. That's why I'm so shocked. In this illusory god palace, who is more talented than Mu Yafeng? Wait, why does the person I'm knocking on look familiar? Looks like Shangguan Yu? A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone knew that Chu Liyue's performance on the star path was indeed more outstanding than Mu Yafeng's. But the current situation was a little exaggerated. I remember that she stopped after entering the Great Grandmaster realm. Why is she starting again now? So fast? Could it be that she used some method like Mu Yafeng? Hiss. That's not possible, right? Mu Yafeng and the 7th Divine Envoy were just punished because of this. How could she go against the rules and commit a crime? Besides, There shouldn't be anyone who can help her, right? Let's go take a look. Xiao Ran also heard the commotion and ran over without thinking. On the way, Chu Liwei actually broke 2 more Xian formations in succession. When they arrived, there were already many people gathered here. Everyone's gaze was focused on Chu Liwei. Bang! Another Xian formation soared into the sky, shining brilliantly. The crowd who had rushed over fell into silence and could only stare blankly. Everything that was happening in front of them was far beyond their imagination, so much so that they didn't even know what to say. Chu Liwei turned a blind eye to all of this. Her expression was calm and persistent. Under her feet, the Xian formations lit up one after another, reflecting a dazzling light in her eyes. Looking from afar on the star path, light flickered. And the woman in red, as if she was stepping on the river of stars, moved forward. At the heavenly gate, Wu Yao brought the 2 girls to the place. Standing in front of the gate, Wu Yao looked at the heavenly gate and frowned. Aunt 11 and Xiao Ran looked at each other. Fifth brother, is there a problem with the heavenly gate? Wu Yao touched his chin and nodded thoughtfully. I think there is. Aunt 12 asked softly, Fifth brother, what's the problem? Wu Yao said seriously, this heavenly gate seems to have not been cleaned for a long time. The 2 of them, what kind of problem was this? Wu Yao clasped his hands. He didn't know why, but he just felt that something was wrong with this gate. Look, the angle of this gate is wrong. Aunt 11 was silent for a moment. Fifth brother, if you don't go in, we'll leave first. Wu Yao coughed and hurriedly said, Don't. Let's go together. Chapter 2357. As the 3 of them spoke, a figure walked out from behind the barrier of the divine gate. It was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He wore a blue robe and had an arrogant expression. He was holding a book in one hand and a pure gold feather in the other. Wu Yao hesitated when he saw him. May I ask if you are the 7th messenger? He remembered that his master had mentioned that the 7th messenger of the palace of the illusory god Jinyun Lai was in charge of guarding the divine gate. The young man frowned. No. I am the 11th messenger, Chiu Tong. The 7th messenger is no longer in charge of guarding the divine gate. Wu Yao and the others looked at each other. It seemed that something had happened in the palace of the illusory god. But this 11th messenger did not seem to be easy to talk to, so they did not ask. On the other hand, Chiu Tong's eyes were filled with disdain as she glanced at them. The 3 of you are exalted gods. How did you get here? Logically speaking, only Her Eminence could cross the illusory god ocean and reach the divine gate. The other exalted gods who had come before were only able to do so with Her Eminence's help. This was the first time that 3 exalted gods had come at the same time. Aunt 11 asked coldly. We have our own ways. We are already here. Do you still need to ask? Chiu Tong choked. He was a little angry, but seeing that the other party was a little girl, he did not want to continue arguing. As the divine consciousness guarding the divine gate, I naturally have to ask. How could these outsiders be so arrogant? Wu Yao saw this and immediately tried to smooth things over. 11th messenger, don't misunderstand. My sister is young and straightforward. Please don't mind her. We did use a divine artifact to get here. This shouldn't affect anything, right? Chiu Tong suppressed the anger in her heart and opened the book. Name. Wu Yao. Chiu Tong raised his hand and the golden feather swept across Wu Yao's forehead. It was empty. Chiu Tong frowned. No bloodline totem? He had heard that many cultivators without bloodline totem had come recently. He did not expect to meet one himself. He glanced at the 2 girls standing behind Wu Yao. You 2 come forward as well. Aunt 11 walked forward nonchalantly while Aunt 12 grabbed her sleeve nervously. Aunt 11 turned to look at her. We just don't have a bloodline totem. What are we afraid of? That's true. 12th mother thought about it and felt that it was very reasonable. Only then did she relax a little. Anyway, there was nothing to be afraid of. What was there to be afraid of? She then looked at Chiu Tong and said softly, Dear Divine Envoy, the 3 of us don't have it. It doesn't matter whether you test it or not. It was better not to waste the effort. Chiu Tong was speechless. What's wrong with these people now? He didn't have a bloodline totem, so why did he seem so proud? This is not something to be proud of. Originally he wanted to ridicule him a little, but now that the other party had put it this way, he really couldn't spit out half a word. The hand holding the ancestor's golden feather gradually tightened. Name. Aunt 11. 12 Nyang. Chiao Tong quickly wrote down the names of the two people on the booklet, then took out 3 dumplings and handed them over. This is dumplings. Aunt 11 didn't wait for him to finish. She raised her hand and took the items over. I've heard of them before. She kept one for herself and tied it around her waist. Then she handed one to Wu Yao and tied the last one for 12 Nyang. After that she looked at Chiao Tong. Now can we go in? Chiao Tong was speechless. The other party was so fierce that he was momentarily stunned. Aunt 11 said impatiently. We're in a hurry. This sentence reminded Chiao Tong. He glanced at them suspiciously. You guys are from Shangguan? Wu Yao laughed. You're really good, 11th Divine Envoy. You guessed it? Chiao Tong gritted his teeth. Was there a need to guess? They also didn't have a bloodline totem and were equally arrogant. There was really only one of them, no one else. Let's go in. He closed the booklet and didn't want to talk to them anymore. He turned around and left. Wu Yao winked at the 2 girls and quickly followed after him. Hey, 11th Divine Envoy, can I trouble you to ask where our master is now? Chiao Tong's expression turned colder. He didn't even turn around. Can't you see for yourselves? How can we see? Wu Yao was talking when he suddenly heard a sound in front of him. Bang. He subconsciously looked up and saw a profound formation slowly blossoming in midair. This is, Master is just in front. As Aunt 11 spoke, she pulled Aunt 12 and walked forward. Seemed like they came at the right time. Wu Yao was about to follow when he suddenly remembered something. He looked back at the divine gate and frowned. The heavenly gate was indeed very awkward to look at. 5th brother, what are you looking at? Seeing that Wu Yao did not follow, 12th Nyang looked back and raised her voice to shout. Of course her voice was still very soft. Wu Yao looked away. They're coming. The 3 of them walked forward along the star path. Many people had already gathered on both sides of the star path. At first glance it was crowded. But it was very quiet. Everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding. They kept silent and only stared at the figure on the star path, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Wu Yao walked forward with the 2 girls. Because the 3 of them looked very unfamiliar, people gradually began to notice them. Chu Luyue suddenly noticed something and looked back. When she saw the 2 faces that she hadn't seen for a long time, she was delighted. 11-12. Why are you here suddenly? Come here. Everyone heard and understood. So they knew each other. Aunt 11 pulled 12 Nyang forward and stood beside Chu Luyue. Master. The 2 girls' faces were filled with longing and joy. Aunt 11 smiled, but 12 Nyang's eyes were already filled with tears. Master, my sister and I missed you so much. Chu Luyue looked at the 2 and felt very emotional. These 2 girls were only a little older than little 13. When the incident happened, they were only 14 years old. In the blink of an eye, they became slim and graceful girls. Wu Yao also came over. Master. Chu Luyue was a little surprised. Wu Yao, why are you? Wasn't he guarding the gate realm in Peach Blossom Cove? Thinking of this, Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat and she frowned slightly. Could it be that there? Wu Yao met her gaze and nodded imperceptibly. Chu Luyue thought for a while and said, Wu Yao, take the 2 of them and wait. I'll be done here soon. Wu Yao responded. Yes. However, the onlookers all revealed looks of shock. Almost done? What did that mean? Chapter 2358. Was she planning to stop after a while or... Bang. Chu Luyue retracted her gaze and quickly drew another Xian formation. As another ray of light bloomed on top of her head, she lifted her feet and continued forward. Aunt 11 looked towards the end of the star path and narrowed her eyes. Master had made up his mind to go there this time? Suddenly, 12 Nyang gently tugged on her sleeve. Aunt 12 turned around. Sister. Aunt 12 still had tears in her eyes and her nose and eyes were red. She leaned forward and whispered, Sister, is that the palace of the illusory god? Aunt 11 nodded. It must be. Aunt 12 pursed her lips. A dark light flashed in Aunt 11's eyes. Do you want to go in and take a look? Aunt 12 gently nodded and blushed as if she was embarrassed. I think I was thinking too much. On the way, she had heard from 5th brother that the palace of the illusory god was very powerful and not everyone could enter. Even her master had not been able to enter, let alone her. Aunt 11 said, I want to too. Aunt 12 was stunned and did not speak. The two of them were twins. Although their personalities were different, they always had the same mind. Just like now, even if they did not speak, they knew what the other was thinking. They both wanted to enter the palace of the illusory god and take a look. Aunt Eleven frowned and felt a little strange, because this idea came out of nowhere. But when Master finished walking the star path, he could enter. Maybe they could find a chance later. Right at this moment, an extremely joyful voice suddenly sounded. Sister 11. Sister 12. The voice was soft and sweet. Even if they did not see the person, just hearing the voice made many people's hearts melt. Many people looked in the direction of the voice and saw a delicate and graceful figure coming towards them. As she walked, the colorful clouds danced and the broken jade tinkled. She was really beautiful. It was little Hachi. She was very fast, and in the blink of an eye she was in front of Aunt 11. Oh, look at how beautiful my two sisters have become after not seeing them for a few years. Little Hachi's eyes lit up. She reached out and pinched the two girls' cheeks. Sister 8 missed you so much. Lady 12 blushed. Sister 8, we miss you too. It was rare for Aunt 11 to nod her head. How is Sister 8? Little Hachi smiled and rolled her eyes. When has Sister 8 ever had a bad life? Even in this illusory god palace, she was still very happy and carefree. Especially after she had slapped the 8th divine emissary Xu Jing a few days ago, her mood had become even better. Are you hungry? Sister 8 specially prepared a lot of delicious food for you guys. Aunt 11 said, Thank you, Sister 8. We had already eaten our fill at third brother's place before we came. Little Hachi clicked her tongue and shed tears of sympathy for Sanson. Based on his stinginess, wouldn't his heart and liver be in pain if these two girls went there? She touched their hair. Don't worry, there are countless treasures on the herb mountain here. Eat as much as you want. Lady 12 quickly waved her hand with a red face. Sister 8, this won't do. I said before that I can only eat until I'm 80 to 90% full. I can't eat as I please. If she really did that, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control her strength. Little Hachi scratched her nose. Don't worry, with Sister 8 here I can do whatever I want. Just as she finished speaking, another sound came from the front. Bang! Another Xian formation was successfully cast by Chu Liyue. Little Hachi looked up with bright eyes. Master, are you planning to finish the star path? Seeing this, the surrounding people couldn't help but whisper. Isn't this speed too fast? The next one will be a Grandmaster Xian formation that starts with the word, heaven. Comparisons are odious. Even if he's cheating, he can't cast so many Xian formations in succession so smoothly, right? Looking at this formation, he's really planning to comprehend all the Xian formations and enter the illusory god palace? Look. The 5th divine envoy is here. The voice in the crowd instantly startled everyone, and they all turned their heads to look at the source of the voice. A young man in black who looked to be 27 or 28 years old was walking out of the illusory god palace. His figure was tall and straight, and he was imposing without being angry. It was the 5th divine envoy, Ruan Jianfeng. In fact, he already knew about the movements on the Star Road. He just thought that Chu Liyue would stop after walking for a while, so he didn't come. After all, he wasn't a Xian master like the 7th divine envoy. The 1st divine envoy had temporarily handed the Star Road to him, so he was only responsible for the Star Road to prevent any accidents. As for the others, he didn't know much, so he naturally couldn't interfere too much. But seeing that Chu Liyue kept moving forward without any intention of stopping, he finally realized that something was wrong and finally moved. Chu Liyue raised her eyes slightly and glanced at him. Seeing that he didn't seem to have any intention of continuing, she quickly retracted her gaze. The 5th divine envoy's sudden appearance was obviously just to see if she could complete the Star Road. Then, just let him watch. Chu Liyue lowered her eyes and looked at the Xian formation in front of her. Heaven Illumination Illusory Formation, she muttered softly. She had a deep impression of this Xian formation, because when she first came to the illusory god palace, she happened to encounter Mu Yafeng comprehending this Xian formation. More importantly, this was also the first Xian formation on the Heaven Scroll. Looking at the extremely familiar patterns, Chu Liyue's emotions surged as countless memories surfaced one after another. Back then she didn't know that this was the so-called Great Grandmaster Xian formation. She only knew that Dabeo asked her to memorize it. For this Heaven Illumination Illusory formation she was in the Red Moon Desert, under the scorching sun, drawing it on the sand over and over again. Even she couldn't remember how many times she tried before she finally memorized it. Now that she thought about it, all that was left in her memory was the wind that carried the coarse sand, the warmth that swept across her face and body. And when she finally succeeded in writing it down, Daoist's rare sentence, "Very good." He almost never praised her. He was always extremely picky and strict. Therefore she remembered those 2 words for a very long time. For a very long time she only knew that she was learning from Daoist, but she didn't even know what she was learning. Until many years later, when she had even experienced life and death, she finally understood that he had been planning for this day since then. Chu Liyue lightly exhaled and several rays of light flew out from her fingers. Every ray of light seemed to know their position clearly. They quickly gathered together and outlined the shape of a Xian formation. Before the crowd could even see it clearly, they only saw a flash of light in front of her. Then an indescribable pressure descended. Bang. Heaven illumination illusory formation. Break. Chapter 2359. All the noise disappeared in an instant. The surrounding space seemed to have solidified and everyone's expression froze. Everything was like a frozen picture. Only little Hachi and a few others were happy. Master is so powerful. Aunt 11 turned her head and said seriously, "It seems that Master will be able to bring us to the illusory god palace soon." Aunt 12 was very happy. Her lips curled into a sweet smile as she said softly, "Yes." Although their voices were not loud, the people around them could still hear them. Xiao Ran's neck stiffened as he looked at them with a complicated expression. A few seconds ago he might have laughed at these 2 girls for speaking nonsense, but now he actually felt that it was not impossible. He had stayed in the illusory god palace for too long and had seen many geniuses. There were also many who had tried to complete the Star Road. But none of them had succeeded. At first he thought that Mu Yafeng had suddenly become enlightened and had a chance to succeed. But in the end it turned out that she had cheated. Not only did she lose, but she also implicated the 7th divine envoy. He was quite powerful. But Chu Liyue's current state was obviously different from Mu Yafeng. These Xian formations she did not hesitate at all. With just a glance she was able to solve them smoothly. It was as if she had a card up her sleeve. Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered something and walked a few steps to the side to stand beside Jue. "Master Jue." Mingshu was concentrating on watching Chu Liyue solve the Xian formation. When he heard this he suddenly quivered. Xiao Ran? What's wrong?" Xiao Ran lowered his voice and asked. "Nothing, I just have something to ask Master Mingshu." He raised his chin. "I saw that Master Mingshu accompanied you here before? Did you just come out of Zhenbao Pavilion?" He knew that Chu Liyue had been in Zhenbao Pavilion recently. Mingshu nodded, "Yes." Then, Xiao Ran thought for a while and asked, "That Xian formation, how's her copying?" Seeing that this heaven illumination illusory formation could not trap her, it was obvious that she had solved it before. If he guessed correctly, Chu Liyue might have already copied the corresponding profound formation. Mingshu's expression became a little strange. The entire mythical flame diagram had been copied. What could he say? Seeing Jue's expression, Xiao Ran was at a loss. Although this matter should not be publicized at this time, there was nothing that could not be said, right? Furthermore, everyone knew that he, Xiao Ran, was only left with the last profound formation that he had yet to decipher. This matter would not affect his interests. Mingshu hesitated for a long time before he finally said, "Just watch." Xiao Ran blinked, then suddenly realized something. What he meant by that? The profound formations that Chu Liyue had deciphered had all been copied. Bang. At this moment, Chu Liyue had successfully deciphered the 2nd profound formation that started with the word, heaven. The resplendent light was still gradually blooming above her head, but her expression was calm. Without hesitation she stepped forward and took a step forward. "Continue." This commotion was really too big. Soon, everyone in the illusory god palace knew about it. Many people went to see it for themselves. In the sky, figures flashed by, all of them heading toward the Star Road. Not far from the illusory god palace's entrance, Mu Yafeng was kneeling alone. Her legs were completely numb and she could barely feel anything. Hearing the sound, she subconsciously looked up. At first she did not pay much attention to it, but when she realized that the profound formations were being deciphered at an astonishing speed, she realized that something was wrong. She did not need to look or guess. Almost instantly she knew who was the one who had caused such a huge commotion. Mu Yafeng knew all the Grandmaster-level Xian masters in the illusory god palace. Other than Chu Liwei, who else could it be? As streaks of flowing light soared into the sky and transformed into profound formations in midair, Mu Yafeng's attitude gradually changed from being a bystander to shock and disbelief. She looked in the direction of the star road in shock, almost suspecting that she had seen wrongly. How could there be someone who could decipher so many profound formations in such a short time? He was even faster than her back then. Even if Chu Liwei had the mythical flame diagram, it shouldn't be like this. When Chu Liwei used the heaven-swapping reflection illusory formation, Mu Yafeng became even more emotional and fainted. Bang! She fell to the ground with a dull thud. Not far away, Yuan Jianfeng, who was standing at the end of the star road, heard the sound and glanced over. His face was cold and expressionless, and he quickly retracted his gaze. At the same time, everyone in the illusory god palace was also alarmed. "It's you." Dumpling was walking when she suddenly sensed a familiar aura and shouted in surprise. Without thinking, she walked toward the illusory god palace's entrance with her short legs. But before she could take 2 steps, she was stopped by Yu Qian. "You can't go." Dumpling looked up and saw Yu Qian's unquestionable expression. She knew it wouldn't be easy to win. Yu Qian thought that Dumpling would make a fuss, but unexpectedly she nodded. "I won't go." Just as Yu Qian found it strange, Dumpling put her hands on her waist and snorted. "I'll just wait here for Ayu to come in." She couldn't go out, so wouldn't it be fine as long as Ayu came in? Chapter 2360. Yu Qian sneered. "You seem to have a lot of confidence in her." In all these years, Jingyun Lai was the only person in the Illusion God Palace who had relied on her own strength to complete the Star Passage and enter the Palace of the Illusion God. This alone was enough to show how difficult this matter was. Now Chu Liwei had only been here for a few months. How could she do it? Dumpling snorted softly. "Because Yu is very powerful. Others might not be able to do it, but she definitely could." Bang! Another sound was heard. Yu Qian turned around to take a look and frowned slightly. This speed was indeed a little fast, Second Oracle. At this moment, a voice was heard. Yu Qian looked at the person who had come. "Lai, why are you here?" Jingyun Lai's face was a little haggard. It seemed that she had suffered some setbacks recently. The corners of his lips moved. "I was just a little curious about the situation on the Star Passage, so I wanted to take a look." He originally wanted to go out and take a look, but considering that his reputation had been ruined recently, it was inevitable that he would be criticized by many people if he went out, so he gave up the idea. He didn't expect to meet Yu Qian and Dumpling here. His gaze lingered on Dumpling for a moment. Shouldn't she be at Fengming Mountain at this time? Why was she in the palace of the illusion god? But seeing that Yu Qian was accompanying her, he didn't ask any more questions. Dumpling ignored his gaze and found a step to sit down. She rested her chin on her hands and waited patiently. Yu Qian looked at Jingyun Lai, thought for a moment and asked, "What do you think about the situation in Shangguanyu this time?" Jingyun Lai was the one who had the most right to speak about this. Jingyun Lai hesitated for a moment. "I can only say that she solved the great grandmaster faster than me." Yu Qian's expression froze. When Dumpling said that Chu Liwei would definitely be able to enter, he did not take it to heart. But if these words came out of Jingyun Lai's mouth, they had to believe it. "So you're saying that she can really break through all the profound formations this time?" Jingyun Lai was silent for a moment before she nodded. Ever since Chu Liwei started walking the star path, he had been secretly observing him. Therefore he had long expected this day to come. He just didn't expect that this day would come so quickly. "Looks like the precious treasure pavilion really helped her a lot," Yu Qian muttered. Jingyun Lai knew that he was talking about how Chu Liwei had been invited by the Precious Treasures Pavilion to copy Xian formations. After all, this was equivalent to giving her the mythical flame diagram. But, even if many people obtained the mythical flame diagram, they still couldn't understand it. Chu Liwei was able to succeed mainly because she was talented enough. Even, he could faintly feel a trace of threat. Jingyun Lai's lips moved, but she still swallowed her words. At this point there was no point in saying these things. However, even if she can finish walking the star path and break through every profound formation, she still can't enter the illusory god palace. Yu Qian stood with his hands behind his back and said lightly. Dumpling looked up and glared at him. Yu Qian laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes. People without a bloodline totem will eventually be stopped outside. This was different from those refining saints. Even if the refining saints themselves did not have a bloodline totem, if they could refine a sacred weapon, it meant that they had taken an aura from the chaos divine jade. Relying on that aura, they could also enter the illusory god palace. Suli was like that. But for Chu Luiyue to enter as a Xian master, it was impossible. Time passed slowly. Chu Luiyue walked forward step by step. At this point, the remaining profound formations on the star path all started with the word heaven. In the eyes of others, this part was the most complicated and difficult. But to Chu Luiyue, it was just displaying the profound formations imprinted in the depths of her mind. Her divine power reserves were extremely abundant, especially after she had found the third zither score. And the most important thing was that after she started to display the heaven profound formation, not only did her mental power and strength not suffer a huge loss, but it seemed to be constantly improving. In the beginning she didn't really realize this, but as she unleashed more and more profound formations, everything gradually became clear. The surrounding people looked at this scene and were all speechless. Many people felt bitter in their mouths. When they looked at each other, they could only see the deep powerlessness and despair in each other's eyes. When someone was just a little bit better than you, you might be envious and jealous, but when this person was much better than you would not even have the thought of comparing. Now they felt this way towards Chu Luiyue. It was an indisputable fact that she could finish walking the star path. Rays of light shot into the sky and bloomed in midair. Chu Luiyue walked forward step by step. After an unknown period of time she finally reached the end of the star path. She stopped and looked forward. In front of her there was one last profound formation. If she continued forward, it would be the gate of the illusory god palace. And Wan Jianfeng was standing there. He stared at Chu Luiyue with a sharp gaze as if he wanted to see through her. Unfortunately, the woman in front of him was beautiful and smiling. Her eyes were deep and calm like the starry night, and it was impossible to see any emotion in them. "You do have some ability," he said. Even though he was not a Xian master, he knew how difficult it was to finish this star path. Now, as long as she could decipher the last Xian formation, it would be considered complete. Chu Luiyue smiled. "Thank you for the praise, fifth divine envoy." Wan Jianfeng's gaze moved down and landed on the Tuan Xen Z tied to her waist. "Unfortunately, even if you crack the last profound formation, you still can't enter the illusory god palace." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. "It won't be too late for fifth divine envoy to say this when I'm really rejected." Wan Jianfeng took a step back. He wanted to see where Chu Luiyue's confidence came from. Chu Luiyue shrugged and lowered her head to play with the Tuan Xen Z. Because of this thing, she had been looked down upon and ridiculed in the illusory god palace. However, it didn't matter. As long as one's fist was strong enough, everyone would learn to shut up. She turned her gaze and looked at the last profound formation. Unlike other Xian formations, this Xian formation's surface area was obviously much larger, and its patterns were also much more complicated. Ordinary people would find it hard to take a few more glances, let alone crack it. Chu Luiyue lifted her sleeves and sat down cleanly. Everyone looked at each other when they saw this. "Is she planning to waste time?" someone asked in a low voice. "I've heard that even the seventh divine emissary took a total of 10 years to activate the final Xian formation. I wonder, how long will she take this time?" 10 years is considered short. Have you forgotten that Xiao Ran has been trapped here for over 10,000 years? But Shangguan Yu's performance isn't much worse than the seventh divine envoy's, right? I guess. Look. She's starting. Chapter 2361. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged, held her breath and raised her palm. Her slender and fair fingertips seemed to dance lightly, and a stream of light instantly flew out. In the next moment, the stream of light transformed into a huge ring in front of her. From afar it was dazzling. She's actually going to start from the outline of the Xian formation? The more complicated the Xian formation, the more it should start from the middle, right? That Xian formation is so complicated. She should first fix the framework, then draw the outline bit by bit. If there's even the slightest mistake, she will lose everything. I really don't know what she's thinking. Because of Chu Luiyue's actions, many people fell into shock and confusion. Xiao Ran also furrowed his brows. This If she did this, wouldn't it be even more troublesome? Chu Luiyue ignored them. With a light wave of her other hand, several streams of light flew out and entered the ring. She didn't stop moving, and the outline of the void was quickly filled up. Throughout the entire process, she didn't pause at all, as if she had already memorized every detail of the Xian formation. In fact, it was indeed so. As Xiaoran watched, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. His gaze focused, and he began to carefully observe every movement of Chu Liyue's hands. This seemed different from what he had understood before. His heart suddenly started beating faster. If Chu Liyue was right, then he seemed to know why he was trapped in the last Xian formation for so long. Thinking of this, Xiaoran unconsciously walked forward. Jie quickly pulled him back. Hey Xiaoran, you can't go any further. The position they were standing at was already the closest to the front. If they wanted to continue forward, they had to walk the star road. Xiaoran stopped in his tracks, but his gaze still didn't move away from Chu Liyue. To be precise, it was the Xian formation in front of her. Jie looked at him strangely. Xiaoran, what's wrong with you? Nothing. Xiaoran muttered, his eyes shining. I might have to follow this girl into the illusory god palace. Jie? So sudden. He couldn't enter for tens of thousands of years, but now he suddenly thought of something and quickly turned to look at Chu Liyue. Could it be? Xiaoran learned something from Chu Liyue? She's breaking the last Xian formation. In the illusory god palace, Jin Yunlai spoke softly with a complicated expression. Yu Qian was expressionless. In his opinion, even if Chu Liyue, she still wouldn't be able to enter the illusory god palace. So what was there to be concerned? Jin Yunlai knew what he was thinking and sighed to himself. At first he thought he was, but now he was. He had never seen anyone who could break through all the Xian formations in such a short period of time. And was of it. Just now he felt that something was wrong. Now he was even more certain that Chu Liyue's situation was different from the others. Previously, after Mu Yafeng broke 7 Grandmaster Xian formations in a row on the Star Passage, she stopped because of the huge consumption of strength and spirit. She rested on the spot for a while before continuing. But later on he could clearly feel her exhaustion and her lack of strength. Even though he had taught her a lot at that time, it was still the same. But Chu Liyue, she seemed to be like a fish in water on this Star Passage. He had never seen such a person. Therefore, no one could say for sure what unexpected things would happen next. The Xian formation in front of Chu Liyue was filled up bit by bit. Countless lines intertwined and were very delicate, but she didn't make any mistakes. Every step was precise. Even Mingshu, who had long known that Chu Liyue had finished copying the mythical flame diagram, was so shocked that he was speechless. Because the mythical flame diagram didn't have this last Xian formation. But looking at her, it was as if she had already drawn it thousands of times. Xiaoran's eyes lit up. In his mind, it was as if a door that had been closed for a long time was suddenly opened. Following Chu Liyue's movements, he also carried out the same simulation in his mind. Although it wasn't as smooth as Chu Liyue's, it still went smoothly in the end. Xiaoran's blood seemed to be boiling. No one had been trapped by the Xian formation for a longer time than him, so he could react faster than the others to what Chu Liyue was doing. Sure enough, his method of breaking the Xian formation was wrong from the beginning. If he chose the wrong direction from the beginning, how could he reach the destination? The waiting time seemed to be especially unbearable. But to Chu Liyue, everything seemed to pass in a flash. She ignored everything around her. Only the Xian formation was left in her eyes. The pattern was gradually drawn, delicate and accurate. Chu Liyue seemed to have entered a subtle state. She didn't even need to look. With a raise of her hand, those flowing lights would automatically go to their original positions. No one would believe that this Xian formation was the easiest one for her. Everything was as natural as nature itself. Finally, at a certain moment, Chu Liyue's hand touched the center. Buzz. In an instant, the Xian formation shone brightly. Countless Xian formations lit up in succession on the entire Star Passage. It was like a galaxy in the dark night, incomparably bright. Chapter 2362. The sky was filled with sparkling stars. It was so bright that it was hard to look at it directly. Many people on both sides of the star road subconsciously raised their hands to cover their eyes, but they couldn't bear to really block their line of sight for fear of missing something. Although they had already expected this outcome, It was still inconceivable when it actually happened. Star Road, in the long thousands of years, other than the seventh divine envoy Jinyun Lai, she was the only one who had walked all the way from the Heaven Gate to the illusory God Palace and cracked all the Xian formations. Furthermore, he had accomplished all of this in such a short period of time. After a short silence, little Hachi was the first to react. Her beautiful eyes sparkled as she screamed, "Ah, I knew it. I knew Master was the best." Her cheeks were faintly red due to her excitement, which made her enchanting and charming face even more moving. She pinched the cheeks of the two girls beside her. "Quick, tell me. Wasn't Master the best?" Aunt Eleven's lips curled into a smile. "Of course." Aunt Twelve's face flushed red. She clenched her small fist and waved it around. Finally, she squeezed out a sentence. "Master is the best." Little Hachi was satisfied. Her face was filled with joy and she couldn't hide it. Of course, she didn't plan to hide it. Wu Yao looked at the three of them from the side and shook his head helplessly. However, his eyes were filled with excitement. He had heard many rumors about the illusory God Palace and knew that the Star Road was very difficult. Not to mention them, even the so-called geniuses in the illusory God Palace couldn't succeed. But now Master had really done it. Naturally, he was proud of it. I know. A white light flashed through Xiaoran's mind. He was so excited that he was almost incoherent. He grabbed Jue beside him. "That's it. So that's it." Ever since Chu Liyue started to crack the last Xian formation, he faintly realized where his problem was. With the completion of the Xian formation, the entire Star Road was lit up by her and he finally understood. Fei was still immersed in shock. After being pulled by Xiaoran, he suddenly felt dizzy. Xiaoran took a deep breath. "I know how to break the final Xian formation." Mingshu was dumbfounded. Don't tell me it's because... Did he have an epiphany after seeing Madame's actions just now? Xiaoran nodded. Yes. He loosened his grip and was about to go forward, but then he thought better of it and stopped. Let's wait until she finishes her business here and enters the illusory God Palace. Although he knew the way to break it, it would still be quite difficult for him to actually implement it. In any case, it was impossible for him to be faster than Chu Liyue. It was very likely that he would have to spend a lot of time. But, in the end, there was still hope to take this step. He was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Not only did Madame decipher all the Xian formations on the star passage, she even enlightened Xiaoran? His expression became even more subtle. At this moment he finally realized that the Madame's strength seemed to be even more shocking than he had expected. Gradually the onlookers also came back to their senses. They looked at Chu Liyue with very complicated expressions. Shock, disbelief, envy, admiration. At this point any words would be pale and powerless. Anything they said would seem sour and useless. She had completed the star passage with her own strength. There was nothing they could do about it. At this moment, the doubts and ridicule they had for her before had become a loud slap to their own faces. It was a burning pain. Chu Liyue raised her eyes and looked at the Xian formation that was rotating silently in front of her. She gently exhaled. Finally, she didn't let him down. Wang Jianfeng frowned. He thought that Chu Liyue would be trapped in the final Xian formation. Even if she could break it, it would take several years. He knew. All of this was indeed outside of his expectations. Fifth Divine Envoy. Chu Liyue tilted her head and her lips curved up slightly. Now can I enter the illusory God Palace? Wang Jianfeng paused and nodded. As long as you can open the door of the illusory God Palace, it will be considered a success. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows. It seemed that the door wasn't that easy to open. She lowered her eyes and glanced at Tuan X and Z tied to her waist, then her lips curved into a smile. Okay. After saying that, she took a step forward. In an instant, the Xian formation floating in the air turned into countless streams of light and entered the star passage. Chu Liyue came to the door, raised her head slightly and looked over. Coincidentally, she had seen this door before. Although it was just an illusion at that time, it had left a deep impression on her. At this moment, standing in front of the real thing, the familiar and strange feeling came again. Everything was so real. Even the marks on the door that had been eroded by the wind and frost of time, and the heavy and vast pressure, it was right in front of her eyes and within reach. Chu Liyue reached out her hand. Her slender and soft palm gently placed on the door. Buzz. Almost at the instant her hand touched the door, a buzzing sound suddenly rang out. The hearts of the onlookers hung in the air. Those without a bloodline totem would encounter obstacles when trying to enter the illusory god palace. Seemed that Tu Luiyue was also the same. A pattern suddenly appeared under Tu Luiyue's palm. Tu Luiyue looked at it. There seemed to be a pattern that gradually appeared on the door. Ayu is coming in. Seeing that the last Xian formation was successfully broken, Dumpling jumped up with joy and excitement. Yu Qian frowned. Jinyun Lai's hands slowly clenched. At this moment, everyone in the illusory god palace heard the noise and looked towards the door. Nan Jinshu hurriedly walked out and happened to meet Su Li at the corner. Nan family head, what a coincidence. Su Li smiled warmly and gently. You also know that little Yu just finished walking the star passage and is coming in, right? Nan Jinshu choked. Actually, he already knew what was happening outside. At first he didn't take it to heart, but as Chu Luiyue broke more and more Xian formations he gradually panicked. Until just now when Chu Luiyue successfully executed the last Xian formation he finally couldn't sit still anymore. Thus he hurriedly came out and wanted to check it out. Who knew that he would run into Su Li? He forced a smile and said, Mr. Su, you're joking. She's not a weapon refining saint and doesn't have a bloodline totem so she can't come in. I just feel that it's a pity. Is that so? Su Li laughed and tilted her head towards the door. Then I'm afraid that Nan family head will be disappointed. What? Nan Jinshu was stunned. Su Li raised her chin. The door is open. Chapter 2363. Nan Jinshu turned his head instinctively. He could see the situation at the door from where he was standing. Yu Qian and Jinyun Lai were standing in front of the Chaos Holy Jade looking at the door. Dumpling was there too. If it weren't for the two of them watching, she would have already rushed over to him. Creak. The sound of the door turning could be heard clearly. The door to the Illusion God Palace was pushed open a crack. Nan Jinshu's eyes widened in shock. At this moment a gust of wind blew. Woo woo. An indescribable pressure came from all directions, completely enveloping Tu Luiyue as if it was going to crush her into pieces. A gust of wind swept over, lifting her fine black hair and making the corners of her dress dance. A few strands of hair covered her eyes. Sensing the biting cold aura that rushed out from the crack in the door, many people looked at each other in dismay. As expected, it was extremely difficult for someone without a bloodline totem to completely open the door. Some people were already shaking their heads. With this situation, Chu Luiyue probably couldn't get in. Inside the door the crack didn't expand. Everything seemed to have stopped. Nan Jinshu's emotions were in turmoil. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His mouth was dry but in the end he forced a sneer. I don't think so. The door is open but she has to be able to get in first. Based on the current situation, being able to open the door a crack was already her limit. Su Li's lips curved without a smile. She didn't reply and walked towards the door. Dumpling turned around when she heard the sound. She ran over immediately when she saw Su Li. Mr. Su. Su Li smiled and bent down to pick her up. Mr. Su, you're also here to wait for Ayu, right? Dumpling asked. Su Li smiled gently. Yes. Yu Qian's gaze paused on Su Li for a moment before he looked away. His lips curved into a cold smile. These people seemed to have almost blind confidence in Chu Luiyue. He had to admit that for Chu Luiyue to be able to complete the Star Road in such a short time he did have some ability. But what kind of place was the illusory shrine? She wanted to come in but that was just a fool's dream. Of course, Su Li could see Yu Qian's disdain. But she didn't care. She just smiled and looked at the door quietly with Dumpling in her arms. Chu Luiyue had said that she wanted to enter the illusory god palace. Then today, she would definitely be able to enter. If she wanted to do something then she would definitely succeed. The biting cold pressure came with the wind, and the flesh, tendons and bones all over his body felt like they were about to be torn apart. Intense pain came from every part of his body. Chu Luiyue's hands trembled slightly. The tongue tied to his waist also swayed in the wind. No one noticed that the words on it had already become incomparably thick without a sound. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes. The sound of a zither suddenly sounded from within her body. Clang. The sound of the zither was bleak, but it contained a powerful aura that pressed forward courageously, sweeping across. At this moment, the pressure that had enveloped her vanished with a loud rumble. She didn't hesitate and suddenly pushed. Bang! The door of the illusory shrine opened. In an instant the wind and clouds surged. Zhou Xian suddenly realized that something was wrong and quickly turned around to take a look. The scene in front of him made his heart sink fiercely. Above the chaos holy jade, sparkling radiance gathered. The scarlet gold flames burning on the top of the surrounding white jade pillars suddenly shook violently. They were like candles in the wind on the verge of collapse. How could this be? He seemed to have suddenly thought of something and looked in the direction of the door again. At the open door, a slender and exquisite figure was standing quietly. Her shoulders and back were extremely straight, like a pine tree in the wind, outstanding and unyielding. On her incomparably beautiful face, the pair of eyes that were as deep as the abyss and as bright as the night sky were shining with a bright light. Behind her, the thousands of lights on the star road flickered and bloomed passionately, but they were not as dazzling as her. Meeting those eyes for a moment, Zhou Qian's heart suddenly gave birth to an extremely strange feeling. It wasn't the first time he saw Chu Liyue, but it seemed to be the first time he saw her like this. Cold, arrogant, lonely, indifferent, noble and high above everyone else. She seemed to be looking over here but also seemed to be looking through all of this, into the vast and boundless distance. Zhou Qian opened his mouth wanting to say something, but found that at this moment he couldn't utter a single word. Then he saw the woman take a step forward, and officially stepped into the illusory shrine. Lightning pool. Under the frozen lightning pool, countless silver and golden tianlei seemed to be frozen, motionless in place. At a certain moment the wind suddenly rose and a golden tianlei slowly swam up. Pull one to move the whole body. The heavenly lightning in the surroundings also began to stir. Seeing this, Xijing, who was standing on the shore, suddenly showed some surprise. Logically speaking, the tianlei here shouldn't have recovered yet, right? Then he suddenly realized something and turned his head to look in the direction of the illusory shrine. Could it be qi? More and more tianlei began to stir. From afar it looked like a dusty chess game that had been sealed for a long time. Suddenly, someone took the chess piece and wanted to change the situation. Whoosh! A figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the lightning pool. It was the fourth divine emissary in charge of guarding here, Mu Dongyu. He was originally peacefully guarding the lightning pool, but when he heard the commotion he immediately moved. He stood in the air and looked down. When he saw the tianlei begin to stir, he immediately frowned. This movement seemed to be unusual. Seeing Mu Dongyu come, Xijing slowly tightened his grip on the hammer in his hand. Crackle. A few streaks of light flashed past his hammer, making subtle noises. Then the tianlei that were about to stir quietly quieted down. It was as if an invisible hand had tipped down and covered all the waves. All of these changes happened in the blink of an eye. Just as Mu Dongyu was hesitating whether to report to the illusory shrine, he found that the movement below had disappeared. He frowned and then looked at Xijing, who was standing on the shore. Chapter 2364. Almost at the same time that he looked over, Xijing also looked over. There was quite a distance between the two, but they could still see each other's expressions. Xijing grinned. Fourth emissary, why are you looking at me like that? Mu Dongyu stared at him for a long time before retracting her gaze. But he was just a god. He thought too much. Worried that something else would happen here, Mu Dongyu didn't leave. Xijing shrugged, weighed the thunder hammer in his hand and suddenly smiled. The main hall of the palace of the illusory god. Jun Jiuqing knelt in the middle with his eyes closed. His body was covered in a layer of red light and his aura kept rising. At a certain moment the buzzing sound finally came. He opened his eyes. In the circular hall on the surrounding walls, dots of starlight gradually lit up and flickered. He said softly, "Finally it's here." His voice was emotionless and his face was slightly lowered. His face was hidden in the faint shadow and couldn't be seen clearly. After a moment he finally got up and walked outside. In the quiet courtyard, the piled-up leaves suddenly flew up. A sound came from the door as if someone was preparing to open it. But in an instant the sound came to an abrupt stop. The courtyard that was silent to the point of desolation once again fell into a deathly silence. When the last Xian formation was drawn, Rong Xiu had already walked out of the room. He stood on the steps with his hands behind his back, and looked in the direction of the palace of the illusory god. There was a deep look in his eyes. Then he closed his eyes. The wind gradually stopped. In the palace of the illusory god, the light on the chaos holy jade gradually dissipated. The golden flames burning on the top of the white jade pillars also calmed down and burned quietly. It was as if everything that happened before was just an illusion. All of the restless changes quietly dissipated, but Yu Qian's brows furrowed even tighter. For some reason he felt that something was wrong. All the movements seemed to be related to Chu Luiyue. He looked at Chu Luiyue with a sharp gaze as if he wanted to see through her from the inside out. Chu Luiyue ignored his scrutiny. He just stared straight ahead. The majestic palace was magnificent, noble and sacred. Even though he had seen it once in the Crimson Moon Desert, that was only an illusion after all. It was far from being as real as seeing it with his own eyes and experiencing it personally. She took a deep breath and continued walking. "Ah you." Tuanzi directly jumped out of Su Li's arms and ran over with her little feet. Chu Luiyue's lips curled into a smile. He bent over and scooped up Dumpling. It was a soft ball with a hint of sweetness. Indeed, it had been a long time since they last met. Chu Luiyue kissed the girl's chubby cheeks. Dumpling hugged her neck and giggled, rubbing its head against her shoulder. "Ah you, I knew you would definitely be able to come in." Chu Luiyue finally remembered something. "By the way, why are you here? Shouldn't Dumpling be at Fengming Mountain?" Dumpling's big black grape-like eyes rolled around as she said in a childish voice. "Because it's boring to stay alone in Fengming Mountain. So I ran over myself. I was planning to walk around and see if there was anything fun, but I just happened to bump into Ayu." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Dumpling obviously had other reasons for coming to the illusory god palace. But this reason didn't seem to be known by others. She pinched Dumpling's nose. "If I had known that our Dumpling was here, I would have definitely come in earlier." "Everyone, isn't this fast?" Yu Qian raised his eyes slightly and looked outside the door. He said coldly, "Jianfeng, close the door." Wan Jianfeng was still shocked that Chu Luiyue had actually entered the illusory god palace. Hearing this, he finally came back to his senses. Yes. He walked in and closed the door again, blocking the countless gazes outside. However, when he looked at Chu Luiyue again, his expression was extremely complicated. A quarter of an hour ago he was still certain that Chu Luiyue would definitely not be able to enter. But now, as the door of the illusory god palace closed again, the spectators standing on both sides of the Star Road were stunned for a moment before they burst into an uproar. "Shengguan, you really went in? Didn't she not have a bloodline totem?" And just now, the illusory god palace did indeed have the intention to reject her. How come in the blink of an eye? Speaking of which, don't you guys feel that something was wrong just now? At this moment, another person stood on the Star Road. It was Xiao Ran. He didn't care about the various discussions around him. He only rubbed his palms and looked at the last Xian formation on the Star Road with shining eyes. For this step he had wasted tens of thousands of years, and even he himself was about to give up. Who knew that there would be a twist? After seeing Chu Luiyue draw the Xian formation with his own eyes, he finally found a way to break it. Swish! A stream of light flew out from his hand and quickly condensed into a ring. He seriously recalled what he saw just now in his mind. He sighed in his heart and was even filled with admiration for Chu Luiyue. She could actually think of such a method, and so naturally too, he muttered softly. If I didn't know that she's not even 20 years old, I would have suspected that she personally created this Xian formation. At this point he couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. Chapter 2365. Yu Qian stared at Chu Luiyue. He kept recalling the scene when she stepped into the palace of the illusory god and frowned. There were too many suspicious points about her. Until now he still didn't know how she came in. His gaze fell on the Tuan Xnz at her waist. It swayed with the wind, light and neat. There didn't seem to be anything unusual. Chu Luiyue followed his line of sight, lowered her head and smiled. "Second messenger, why are you looking at me like that?" Indeed, this ball of tongue had almost exploded the moment she entered the room. But there was an invisible and powerful force that calmed it down. Unfortunately, that force disappeared quickly and she didn't have time to feel it. Yu Qian said indifferently. "You're the first person to come in without a bloodline totem." Chu Luiyue looked at Su Li. "Didn't Mr. Su come in too?" "She's a weapon refining saint. Naturally she's different. In addition, you're the second person to come in from the Star Road." Of course he had to pay more attention to such a person. Chu Liwei looked calm and let him size her up. She came in openly through the door. Could it be that these people could chase her out? Su Li walked over with a smile on her face. Little you, congratulations. She knew that she could do it. Chu Liwei also laughed. I said that I wouldn't let Mr. Su wait here for too long. After coming in, many things were convenient. For example, investigating the whereabouts of Dabao and Lan Shao. But now was obviously not the time. Chu Liwei looked around. It was exactly the same as the scene in the Red Moon Desert. However, there was one difference. The palace of the illusory god wasn't covered by the white fog, so she could see more clearly. Finally, her gaze fell on the main hall in front of her. That should be the main hall of the palace of the illusory god. From the corner of her eyes, a figure came into view. Chu Liwei tilted her head to take a look and instantly smiled. Master Nan, long time no see. How have you been? Nan Jinshu, who was about to leave quietly, suddenly froze. He turned around awkwardly with a very interesting expression on his face. You, Master Yu, what did you call her? Before Chu Liwei could say anything, the second messenger suddenly spoke. His eyes seemed to be covered in a layer of frost with a bone-chilling coldness. Nan Jinshu was shocked and Chu Liwei raised her brows in confusion. Why did it seem like he didn't like it? But this didn't seem to have anything to do with him? Nan Jinshu swallowed his saliva nervously and replied, yes. Yu's name. Master Yu's second messenger he called Yu was Yu. After all, when Chu Liwei took over the Peach Blossom Dock in the world of God, that was how everyone addressed her. The Nan family suffered heavy casualties in the Battle of the Peach Blossom Dock. For a long time, Nan Jinshu was traumatized by Chu Liwei. Even here, logically speaking, he should be more confident than Chu Liwei. But this woman had a lot of trump cards. Every time he thought she was going to die, she would still be able to fight her way out and make everyone look at her in a different light. Just like now. He didn't expect her to be able to come in. In a moment of nervousness, he called her that. Yu Qian's expression turned even colder. Don't call her that again. If I hear it a second time. Yes. Before he could finish, Nan Jinshu had already sensed the severity of the situation and hurriedly responded. Chu Liwei narrowed her eyes. This was really strange. Wasn't it just calling her Master Yu? It didn't seem like a big deal. Why did Yu Qian care so much? He was the second divine envoy. Logically speaking, he shouldn't care about such a small matter. It was meaningless and unstylish. But looking at his reaction, she lowered her eyes to hide the ripples in her eyes. When she looked up again, her expression had returned to normal. Patriarch Nan, since the second divine envoy said so, you really have to be more careful in the future. Don't cause any trouble for yourself because of me. Nan Jinshu's face turned pale. You. Patriarch Nan, you said you would wait for me in the palace of the illusory god. Now that I see you, Patriarch Nan, you really keep your word. Chu Liwei smiled. I'm new here, so I don't know much about the palace of the illusory god. I'll have to trouble Patriarch Nan in the future. Nan Jinshu's legs turned to jelly as he complained in his heart. Trouble? Chu Liwei was already good at fighting in the past. Now that he had comprehended all the Xian formations in the Star Passage, he could be considered a top grandmaster. His combat strength was almost unimaginable. If the two of them really fought, he wouldn't even know how he died. Nan Jinshu forced a smile. I wouldn't dare. He couldn't wait to avoid Chu Liwei in the future. If he knew this would happen, he would have just stayed in his own residence. Why did he have to come here? Patriarch Nan and I are old acquaintances. There's no need to be so polite. Chu Liwei smiled and said sincerely. Nan Jinshu couldn't wait to run away. It seems like you have some misunderstanding. Yu Qian looked at Chu Liwei and said. Entering the palace of the illusory god through the Star Passage only means that you have the right to enter the palace of the illusory god in the future. It doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want here. There are many places in the palace of the illusory god that you can't go to. Do you understand? Chu Liwei blinked. I don't really understand. Second divine envoy, please tell me what those places are. I don't want to offend you in the future. Yu Qian's face was cold. He really didn't want to talk to Chu Liwei, but the current situation. The main hall of the palace of the illusory god is where the divine envoys live. Chu Liwei nodded. I see, Yu Qian continued. Since you've already entered the palace of the illusory god, I won't say anything else. Once you're here, just focus on your cultivation. Half a year later, those who can't reach the immortal state will be kicked out of the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows. The qi of heaven and earth here was indeed rich and pure, which was very helpful for cultivation. For most cultivators, the biggest benefit of entering the palace of the illusory god was to increase their chances of reaching the immortal state. Only those who succeeded could continue to stay here. And those who failed would still be kicked out. The survival of the fittest was the most obvious and cruel rule here. Thank you, second divine envoy. Chu Luiwei nodded. Yu Qian's eyes fell on Dumpling. Well, you should go back now. Tuanzi pouted unhappily and hugged Chu Luiwei's neck, refusing to let go. Yu Qian's eyes were cold. Chu Luiwei patted Dumpling gently. Anyway, I will be here in the future. Tuanzi, you can come whenever you want.